recording to say welcome to all of you that are joining us today for our first online community of practice event of the Building Digital Capability and Digital Experience Insights communities. And really pleased today to have so many of you joining us. I think we had about 326 delegates registered, and I see the numbers are climbing as I'm speaking. But this is where we would have been today. We have worked very closely with the University of Northampton in setting up today's agenda, and we would have been at this spectacular campus, and Rob and Ali would have been welcoming us there today. So unfortunately we can't be there, but we're there virtually, and the sun is still shining, I believe, and we're going to be hearing more from Rob and Ali shortly in our opening keynote. But a big word of thanks to Rob for all his support for this event. I'm just going to give you a very, very brief intro from the Jisc team. We have got, as I say, merging our two sort of communities of practice today. So firstly, a welcome from our Building Digital Capability team. You will see some changes to roles and faces on that screen. A warm welcome to Ryan, who is our new technical support analyst, who many of you will be engaging with through our help desk functionality. And you will see, unfortunately, that Heather Price, who many of you have worked with over the years at Jisc, left us last week. So we wish her well in her new role. Also, a welcome from the Digital Experience Insights team. Those faces, I hope, are familiar to many of you, as we've had a lot of interaction with you around the work we've been doing on that side as well. So this is our first joint meeting, and our communities of practice events are very much about welcoming you, encouraging you to share practice, whether that's face-to-face or online as we're doing today, but very much trying to share approaches around how we are enhancing student, staff and organisational digital capability, how we can ensure that we are gathering feedback and effective approaches to students and staff's expectations and experiences of technology. And today's meeting very much is focusing on how colleges and universities are supporting their staff and students in the current situation that we're in, and of course the move to remote working and remote learning. So it's going to be a packed agenda for today. We have got breaks for virtual tea and coffee and lunches built in, but we really do encourage you to get the most from today. Make those connections, do that networking. We are using the Twitter hashtags for those of staff who are not able to actually participate live. We will be tweeting some of the key highlights as well using those hashtags. So a reminder around our programme today, we're absolutely delighted to have Professor Ale Armellini and Rob Howe from the University of Northampton, who are going to be giving our opening keynote for today. We then will be having a short virtual tea and coffee break. I'm afraid it's bring your own cakes today, followed by 2 sessions from our members. And this is where we're very much hearing how colleges and universities are supporting staff and students in the current situation, and importantly focusing on their digital capability and looking at how we can enhance the digital student experience. We have got a virtual lunch break built in there, and then we will be doing a closing summary and an opportunity for you to share feedback on the event, what further events you would like from us, and what we can do to support you going forward. We will be circulating an evaluation form. We really value your feedback, and all the presentations from today will be shared from the events page. Recordings will be shared via email. So in the chat window, just while I whiz through the next very brief set of slides before I hand over to Ali and Rob, please do share what one thing you'd like to take away from today's meeting. It's always valuable, I think, when one starts an event to gather some perceptions and some reflections of what delegates are hoping to achieve from today. You've heard our sort of aims and objectives. Really nice to hear what you're hoping to get, and we will return to that at the end of the event as well. So very, very brief update on our Building Digital Capability service. A reminder, of course, where you can get further information around the work we're doing in this area, and in particular, just a few updates from us in terms of new developments. We've recently launched for our Discovery tool, which is our self-reflective tool staff and students can use to assess their digital capability. some new institutional dashboard visualizations, and those are giving a lot more detail and being able to visualize the data that institutions are getting back around areas where their staff need further interventions to support their digital capability. That went live this month, but equally some coming soon highlights. We're aware now that we are gathering a lot of data from our 60 subscribed organisations. We've got nearly 16,000 users from our 60 organisations covering FE and HE. And we are, of course, collecting a large amount of anonymised data in terms of the skills and the capabilities of our staff and students. So Lou McGill is working with us to analyse that data, and we will hope to be able to share early findings in a blog post around that analysis, which I think will be very, very valuable and insightful in terms of the areas where staff may need more support, what areas of development we can work with the sector on, particularly in the current environment. We're also planning a new question set within our discovery tool for September, and that will be focused on supporting staff to self-assess their capability and confidence, to plan, design, deliver and assess learning online. We're very much aware that the current situation is not something that's going to go away, and hence we need to be able to support our staff with resources and ideas in terms of how they can take forward their practice. We've also been doing work with LinkedIn Learning. We're aware many organisations are using LinkedIn Learning for staff development purposes, and we've been doing a mapping of the LinkedIn resources to our digital capability framework, so that subscribers are able to map their resources that they're using into the discovery tool in an easier format. Wellbeing is a current theme that I think is coming through very strongly at the moment, and just a reminder, we have got some excellent briefing papers which are available through our service website. Please do sign up to our mailing list, and you can follow our blog there in that information. Just also worth mentioning our digital experience insight surveys. Many of you are participating in those at the moment, and we're really delighted to say that we've exceeded our 2019 numbers with 38,000 student responses to date, covering further education and higher education. Those surveys close on the 29th of May, and then the team are going to be very busy analysing that data. Institutions will be getting their benchmarking data and being able to sort of also take forward their analysis locally, and very much drawing on that intelligence to inform their planning going forward. Our professional services and teaching staff surveys close at the end of June, and currently we have over 7,300 responses from those two groups. So very valuable as well to get our staff experiences and views, particularly in the current situation around how technology is supporting them in their roles. We're very excited to say we've been working on a small pilot for our researcher survey. That has now completed. We're in the process of finalising the report, and that will be published on our website in June. That will then mean we are able to survey a holistic view of all our staff within our organisation, and that will form part of the suite of surveys that we'll be rolling out in September. Just a reminder as well, particularly as we're thinking of student induction and preparing for September, we have pulled together a toolkit for supporting the digital experience of new students, and that was launched in March. So just a reminder, if you haven't seen that already, that draws on the research and evidence from our surveys and could provide some useful guidance in your planning going forward. Just a plug for our Corona community and resources that Jisc have pulled together more widely. That's a very active group, and giving a lot of up-to-date information across all the areas of our services, but also identifying and collating community resources that have been shared with us. There's a wealth of information out there at the moment, and those have been collated on a very useful group. The link is in there if you're interested in following that up. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to hand over to Ale and to Rob. Just while they get their presentation set up, I'm just going to check if we have got any questions in the chat window. If you want to join in the survey this year, we may need to follow that up. If you're able to drop us an email, Karen, we can follow that up with you after today's session, if that's okay. I don't know if there are any other questions in the chat, Jeanette or any of my colleagues. I think that's a no.
That's
sorry,
a no, Sarah.
I'll hand over to Rob and to Ali.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to everyone. So welcome from University of Northampton, even though you're now all virtual. This presentation is going to be around our responses really over the past few months, and also a little bit more background on what we're actually doing at University of Northampton. So first of all, to introduce ourselves, so I'm Rob Howe, Head of Learning Technology at the university. And Ali, do you want to introduce?
I'm Ale Armellini. I'm Dean of Learning and Teaching at the University of Northampton. A big thanks from me to the Jisc team for inviting us to take part in this event.
So, as Sarah mentioned, the whole event was actually originally planned to be on site at the University of Northampton, and I've grabbed some of the screenshots really around what you would have seen had you been on site, and hopefully we can do a future event maybe next year actually on campus, so you can actually come and see where we are. So this is one of the world's newest purpose-built campus. We actually converged to other campuses into this environment, and it is the culmination of around about sort of 5 years of work and planning to actually get to where we are at the moment. And you can see, you know, from the screenshots, you can see some of the views from outside, sort of at the, you know, the 11 o'clock, the 3 o'clock position and so on. And then you can also see some of the views inside, and actually the one on the bottom right hand side particularly shows the different levels that we've actually got within one of our buildings, the Learning Hub, where you can see right at the bottom you've got a sort of big inquiry area, you've got library completely merged into the environment, and then you've got teaching rooms really merged into that as well. So they're on sort of different levels. So as you move between the building, you'll actually come across the fact that actually the whole environment on the space of the campus is very adaptable, very flexible. Actually, a lot of the rooms are very thin in terms of what's actually inside there. A lot of the IT components are actually behind, so the idea is that you don't have a ton of trailing wires, and it means that we can move things around incredibly quickly within those rooms itself. As well as that, the whole space across the whole of the campus is very integrated and very democratic. So the idea is that there isn't necessarily a building owner in the way that we had previously. Actually, a number of teams actually are all working together to define how the buildings are actually used. And it makes some of those discussions a little bit more interesting, a little bit challenging, but we don't have, for example, as we had previously, we don't have a business building as it was previously, but what you have is you have all of those subjects integrated within all of the buildings across site. And for us, that's made us a more efficient institution. In terms of what was actually underpinning the move itself, we had a big move to active blended learning over the past sort of 6 years, and that actually has influenced the way that the design actually took place for the new campus. So I'll hand over to Ali to talk a little bit more about ABL and where it actually came from.
Thanks, Rob. I think it is important to realize that active blended learning has two rather complex terms embedded in it. Active, from very old definitions of active learning, involves two things: involves doing and involves thinking about what we do. Both parts are key in our approach. Active blended learning, which I will define in detail in the following slides, has been the University of Northampton's approach to learning and teaching for the past few years. And the campus, the wonderful campus that Rob has shown pictures of and described, is the university's response to that approach. So we feel incredibly lucky to be in a position to design a campus from scratch on the basis of a view of learning and teaching, with students at the heart of the experience, with highly interactive teaching spaces, with no lecture theatres, with no staff offices, and that entire blend of spaces and flow that the pictures try to capture, and that we invite you to visit once it is safe to do so, that has very much shaped what Northampton is as a university today, and it's somehow beginning to shape what we refer to as active distance learning, which itself is a complex blend. So just to explain those 2 points, in both cases, ABL and ADL involve the notion that content is not king. What matters is not the content that we share. What matters is what students do with that content, why they do it, and who they do it with. And that's what we refer to as content not being king. Context is. Good learning contexts, and we hope that the new Waterside campus provides a great context for that. Good learning contexts like that campus promote quality contact, and that contact can take place physically, but it can also take place virtually. And the way in which those two blend is what makes the blend successful. We need to be aware that the literature, particularly the early literature, the early 2000s, referred to blended learning as the best bits of this with the best bits of that, or a continuum from X to Y. Well, actually, I think we need to think rather more creatively about the notion of the blend, and particularly on the understanding that active distance learning is itself a very complex blend, and a very exciting blend, and a very student-centered blend. We can make it. Failing to plan for ABL or failing to plan for ADL means planning to fail. And I will refer to that later on in the presentation with an example of how we're supporting colleagues to plan for active blended learning, as well as for active distance learning during this period. The focus shifts from physical versus virtual into much more nuanced and complex areas of synchronicity and asynchronicity. So even within short sessions, even within an hour, one could think of blending in a clever way synchronous real-time elements with asynchronous ones. And that can generate a much more engaging experience, and much more, which is much more conducive to good outcomes and to student participation and engagement. So that takes me to the current model of ABL, which incorporates the last few weeks of active distance learning. Absolute center to the approach is the sense-making work, taking ownership of stuff. What matters is not the stuff, but the process of owning it. So that's what we refer to as sense-making activities with embedded content and resources. The embedded content and resources they are not an aim in its own right. It's not about watch this video and come to next session. It's not about read that chapter and come to next session. It's a bit more sophisticated than that. It is about building the scaffold where the sense-making piece with embedded content and resources is center stage. The real-time session typically in a synchronous way, apologies, that is the usual environment where we discuss, where we critique, where we set goals, and we move on to consolidation, evaluation, and reflection afterwards. And that feeds back into more sense making. The words online, for example, are not present in this diagram. They are not part of the model. Why is that? Because, as I said before, we are not interested really in a two-track approach where there are bits that happen online and bits that happen in the real classroom. We are interested in good practice as a blend. We're interested in bringing those two tracks into a single element that constitutes the learning experience. A lot of these ideas operate on campus, off campus, and they can operate in different orders. This is presented to colleagues as guidance for practice, not as an imposition of how they should be teaching. That said, colleagues have largely embraced and supported approaches that make the learner center stage and make the sense-making activities a central part of the pedagogical design. So this takes us to the definition of active blended learning, which is at the moment, after a number of years, it is at the moment under review, and we might come up with a new definition in the coming weeks and months. But this is the one that we've been using so far. Active blended learning is an approach that combines sense-making activities with focused student interactions. As you know, the three key types of interactions are learner-learner, learner-content, learner-tutor, in appropriate learning settings in and outside the classroom. And what ABL does is it enables a sharp focus on knowledge construction, on reflection and critique, on learner autonomy, and of course, ultimately, on the achievement of learning outcomes. That's what we mean by active blended learning at the University of Northampton. Over to Rob.
Okay, so obviously Ali's talked about some of the background really to why we moved to the new campus, and then obviously for many people, obviously nearly all of us, things sort of changed in March, as you said there. All of the work that was involved in our transition, so we did certain things prior to, over the past few years. So we issued everyone who is a mobile member of staff with a laptop, so that's tutors and so on, along with an increasing focus really on digital capability support, meant that our move to emergency remote teaching was made with slightly less issues than those faced maybe at comparable institutions. That's not to say at all that the move was easy. There are certainly significant challenges in the process, but we did have some really nice foundations that we were able to build on over time. So we had my learning technology team, they were already used to remote support. We've done work in that area before. We've got a wide range of institutional tech tools which are already licensed for use. We had a very highly supportive library learning services team, already very familiar with remote support for staff and students. A full range of highly responsive student support services teams throughout the whole of the university who were able to gear up relatively quickly to provide support for our students. And also we used the results from our Jisc staff and student digital trackers, and that gave us a temperature reading of the current status of students at that time. We actually closed it in March, just before we all went remote. So we actually were analysing that data as we're going remote, and actually that gave us a really good bit of feedback about where the staff and students were at that particular time. As the university actually moved from critical response to business recovery, there were regular focus group meetings with key staff to coordinate responses at each stage. And particularly I noticed that communication to staff and students rapidly improved during this period. I mean, as many people would have noticed, it was very difficult in those first few weeks, but actually over time, the amount of communication and the quality definitely improved. Some issues moved from focusing on sort of macro items down to more personalised support from the initiation of the sort of physical campus shutdown. Several documents we rapidly created and approved. So we had hints and tips on teaching remotely, clarification on our institutional approved tech and the range of support for each of those, the importance of quality standards with remote delivery, and obviously we had a home support hub as well, which was pushing things like display screen equipment and so on. Naturally, lots of challenges for both staff and students, particularly around the range of digital skills, personal use, disabilities, technical issues with personal devices and home networks and Wi-Fi. Emotional support was also picked up as a key area that needed focus within the institution, and additional information was very much provided to our staff and students actually around that. There was rapid increase in the use of online conferencing tools for staff and students. And we were tracking a lot of that during the process. So for example, we used Blackboard Collaborate. Use went up in that first week 500% from where it was previously. And actually it's maintained that level as we've been ongoing. And to be honest, it's actually increasing slightly as more people are moving on. So in terms of sort of looking at our post-COVID situation, Ali will talk a little bit more about active distance learning.
It isn't difficult to imagine that as the COVID situation approached and as it became clear that we were going to be in lockdown for a while, and that lockdown could be extended in various guises over the next few months, we needed an approach that kept the spirit and the ethos of active blended learning, but translated that into an environment where there was limited or no contact at all on the campus, which is why we created a tentative, not definitive, but a tentative definition for active distance learning, which is very much in line with the definition I shared with you a few minutes ago on active blended. This is an approach to our off-campus students' experiences. We combine, again, sense-making activities with focused and engaging interactions in small groups, in synchronous and asynchronous digital learning settings. And again, the areas of focus are similar to the ones I listed under ABL. I would stress here that the work that colleagues had been doing over the past 6 years on active blended learning has put them in a rather, I would say, strong position to operate within the ADL environment quite effectively. We have largely avoided the position where people just upload content and hope for the best. Our VLE, from the very beginning of the ABL experience, we've tried to make our VLE as different as possible from a content repository. Again, what matters is not the content, but what students do with it, why they do it, and who they do it with. And in that spirit, we have created the ABL approach, and now, more recently, the ADL approach. But people, colleagues, need support. And they needed support in a very urgent manner. Emergency remote teaching, as it's often termed, did require bespoke, tailor-made support. And one of the areas we found that colleagues really needed help with was session planning. And what you're looking at there, apart from the cartoon, which I'm sure you're enjoying, what you're looking at is a simple lesson plan for a 1-hour session. And simple though it seems, and although this is well known to those who have been who are trained teachers, a lot of our colleagues did benefit from having a simple tool like this to help them plan for sessions in the ADL environment, the active distance learning environment, and that relates to the other temptation. One was upload content, and hope for the best. Well, we avoided that quite largely, and the other temptation was very much let's copy what we do in the classroom. Let's translate that to a Zoom session, or in our case, to a Blackboard Collaborate session. And just replicate practices that we were doing in the classroom. Now, tools like this, lesson plan, integrate synchronous and asynchronous elements within even a short session, and using that for planning on a day-to-day basis simplifies things, clarifies things and provides a structure that does not necessarily copy practices from the physical classroom into the virtual environment. Colleagues needed guidance on this. They still do. The lesson planning workshop within our staff development framework is one of the most popular ones. It's very quick, it's very effective, it's very informal, and it helps people plan better. So that's one example of the things that we've been doing to support colleagues in the new environment. Back to Rob.
Okay, so on this slide, obviously, you can see some of the stuff that we were trying to avoid and some of the stuff that we are starting or continuing. So in terms of, our stages that we actually went through, I mean, in the first stages, there was an immediate extension really to existing activities, just to allow time to consider some of the options, because obviously this is a massive change that people were having to go through. And then following this, there was actually a move to sort of convert existing exams into time-constrained assignments where possible. And there was very much a focus on assessments, which could actually be done offline and then submitted electronically. And that's sort of, for us, that minimized some of the technical issues. The asynchronous work carried on as normal with extended deadlines. We were obviously also looking at professional body requirements, and we were looking at much individual variability as well. So we were looking at how do we deliver IELTS, for example, for delivery in China as well. We had to make the support teams aware to restrict support whilst open booked, and considering graduations. So obviously we had a number of ceremonies, as most institutions did, and we were trying to work out how to actually resolve that. And actually that's evolved over the past few days, actually, in terms of Northampton's plans on that side. Mitigating circumstances actually got suspended, and what we did was we put in 3 opportunities to sit actually as a general approach, and the same applied really with extensions. And really, because of that, there's no need, because really students can then just submit to the next deadline. They still only get 2 sits, a first and a sit and a resit, but they've got 3 opportunities essentially to actually go through that. So we've tried to help students where possible. Students with real technical issues can also have individual circumstances considered, very much on an exceptional basis. They have to initiate that, and then there's a form obviously to work through. Graduation, we've got to remember, graduation is just the ceremony. Students will still be awarded, they will still get their degree. It's the event itself, the ceremony, that will probably follow at some point in the future. But at the moment, it's looking for us that will probably be in probably around about sort of February time, just so that we can make sure we can plan that properly. I was on the Blackboard Teaching and Learning Conference 2 days ago, and one of the things that I picked up was this slide, and actually this resonates quite nicely with what I'm hearing from some of our students as well. So in terms of what has been good, the commuting side, obviously, focusing on the essentials, and university use of digital technology. So I'm seeing the same stuff very much at Northampton as well. In terms of the bad, obviously for some students, being in a lockdown situation has not been helpful, but I think a lot of people will say the same regardless of whether you're a student or not. For some people, lectures are less effective, and this depends on the individual approaches. I mean, we're trying to get consistency, as you've seen from Ali's charts previously, but obviously there is some variability, but things are definitely improving. This particular student was focusing 12 different conferencing tools. You can obviously reflect on your own institution how many different tools there are, and we are doing a lot of work at Northampton to try and refine that very much at the moment. There's also that interesting comment about being spied on during exams. That actually was around the proctoring or invigilation tools that they're using, where the webcam is enabled, and it's a new experience for students if they haven't been in that situation previously. So in terms of what we're going to retain experiences from, for the next academic year, as you can see there, from the cartoons, the left-hand side one, actually, for some people, this is staff meetings as such now. Hopefully they're not as disruptive as implied on the cartoon. We're also looking at the induction process. So that's really what the right-hand cartoon is very much looking at. We're looking at alternative ways to do our induction now. We're looking at hybrid approaches. we notice that, you know, people have realized that they can actually change. This has forced people to change, but they've realized they can do it. They can be successful in doing it, and they can perform in ways that they hadn't previously appreciated. So in very much, you know, as mentioned by you know, Andrew Lloyd Webber on a Friday every time, now the show must go on. There's a few experiences that must be actually retained. So very much a better balance of technology and face-to-face delivery, more flexible delivery. Students are looking for that now. We've shown we can do that, and they want that to carry on. Enhanced or creative tracking now of student progress. So we've got the Jisc student and staff digital trackers. So very much we're going to continue using those. And we're going to very much, as I mentioned, have a much more look at the induction process. Ali, your take on that?
Yes, the one thing I would say on this one is that very often we refer to our new approach through exclusively having online committees, online meetings, online university management teams, and so forth. And the question that we get, and the question that we ask ourselves, and I think we should, is have we lost some of the dynamics? Have we lost some of the meaty conversations? Have we lost depth in the process of doing this? We have gained with practice, we have gained quite a bit of efficiency. We have gained a range of other things, structure, but have we lost some of the pleasure in doing these activities, these events, in the way that we did until mid-March? And I think it is worth reflecting on this. I just wanted to also reflect on what has changed, what has remained. I would want to put it to you, colleagues, that the mission of the university has not changed. In our case, it's transforming lives, inspiring change. That has very much remained the same. But studying and teaching in this way is far more complex, far more exciting, far more challenging than the cartoon suggests. And that boils down to an issue of pedagogic design. We can make it not just simple, but we could run the risk of making it simplistic, which is a very different proposition. And we can equally spend time, spend effort, get advice, get feedback to make the experience rich, and to make the experience a lot more challenging and engaging. We do have at the University of Northampton a new vision, and that vision is to become the world's most socially innovative university. And that, interestingly, coincides with the pandemic. So we are, as we speak, we are beginning to draft our approaches to achieving or to getting closer to that vision. We are, as I said before, in the process of redefining, reconceptualizing both active blended learning and active distance learning. And we are trying to articulate what those terms mean to different target audiences. What I've shared with you today in terms of the definitions and the diagrams and so forth might be suitable for an academic audience, but we need to articulate those messages correctly for students, for parents, for employers, and for others. We need to think about the application of the same concepts for rather important events such as induction, welcome and induction week, or welcome and induction month, or should we perhaps be on welcome and induction mode throughout the year? We've got to not forget the projects and the initiatives that were taking place when the pandemic hit. We need to take account of that and refine and review ways of taking those forward, reviewing that, and hopefully completing those initiatives. At this point, I'd like Rob to share some of his ideas on what can change and what should remain.
So just to build on what you're saying, Ali, so ways of working are going to change, but obviously projects are going to very much remain. We're very much in that business continuity stage now. We've gone from that critical response that we had previously, very much into that working into trying to get this business as usual now. We are working on increasing staff and student digital literacy. I mean, we have shown that staff can and students can move to different environments than they had previously, and they can survive and thrive actually in those areas as well. We're finding key tools and we're dropping the ones that actually aren't needed now or cause confusion. So we're very much looking at our licensing situation, continuing to enhance VLE, in our case Blackboard, as our key delivery tool, and looking for integration of all of those systems to actually improve the user experience. It's shown that we need to keep up with our regular communication. We've set up new channels that we didn't have previously. We're going to carry on with those. And I think it's been really helpful actually in terms of unearthing things that we didn't know existed in the past. But the situation for the fact that it was completely disruptive and you know, really unpleasant for all of us actually has shown some benefits in that we are doing some things differently now that we're very much going to retain. For the insight survey, we are going to continue obviously using that for staff students. We're going to investigate that for the research side as well. And we're now looking at the discovery tool, because obviously that ties in nicely for us with our move towards profiling staff and students, knowing where they are and how we can best help them as a university. So I hope that talk's been helpful to you. And I know that we've spoken a little bit over time at the moment, but obviously we can pick up chat over the day. I'm going to stay on for the whole of the session. Ali will, I think, for most of it as well. So we're happy to pick up the conversation. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Rob and Ali. And that was a really visionary presentation. It was, you know, I think that reminder, Ali, about good and effective practice is so important. And that focus on the structure, the lesson plan, that guidance, which, you know, is what all good teachers should be doing anyway, but it really does sort of emphasize the importance of that within the situation that we're in currently. Some fabulous ideas, and, you know, there's been a lot of discussion in the chat window, which I'm going to pick up now. But before we go to the chat window, I'm going to go to the questions which are in the question and answer panel. So thank you to those delegates that have put that in. And I'll just ask the first one. Interested in the operation of no staff office space. What does the new normal look like? Ali, Rob?
So I'll pick that up initially. That was it was a really interesting situation, because obviously we moved from a situation where people had individual offices at the old campus, and we had an open office situation. It is one of the really interesting transitions, and we certainly would love to have shown you, had you been on site, what that actually looks like. And you know, certainly do come on when we are allowed to invite people on again. People think it's harder than it is to actually move to a no office space, and it is different to what we thought. So we definitely had a lot of worries about moving to that, you know, across the whole of the staff population, and many people said it's impossible for me to function without an office, and the reality is slightly different. We are looking at capacity, so the office spaces are looking at around about 60 to 80% capacity at any particular time for the anticipated groups. From an estate's point of view, it's obviously more efficient to manage those types of environments, and from a working point of view, I think it's safe to say, and Ali will say his thought, but I've never managed to fail to get a seat. That was one of the things people worried about. If it's open an office, will I ever get a seat? And actually, I normally get the seats that I'm sort of aiming for. So there's always free seats around. And because we were all mobile, then actually we're just taking our office with us. Our telephone system's mobile, so wherever my laptop is, that is my phone system, as well as everything that I need to actually do my job. So I can sit in one location, and actually it's given me flexibility now. So if I want to be completely quiet, I'd go to a completely different area of the building, and my office just follows me now. Ali, your thoughts?
Just a quick one on that. I agree. It is a lot. It has been a lot easier than it seemed. I would I would say that there is another temptation here to equate what we're doing, the approach that we've taken to hot desking, and really we don't like that term. It doesn't sound right. It is not right. The spaces, the shared spaces that we use are integrations of other spaces too. It's workspace, it's academic, our professional services workspace, combined with individual meeting rooms for confidential conversations, with kitchens, with comfy areas. There's all sorts of different types of spaces with different furniture and different arrangements within that area. In the literature, this is termed activity-based working, ABW, and it is not hot desking. It is actually a lot more fluid, a lot more communicative than a kind of a call center approach would suggest. It's actually much better than many people thought.
Yes, and having seen that, you know, when I visited, I was very, very impressed by the way those spaces were structured, and you know, you did want to work there. It was a really welcoming environment. Thank you, Ali, Rob, and Rob. We've got a question from Gordon Duffy McGuy, who's asking, how do you prepare and support new students for the challenges and demands of ABL? I can imagine most have no previous experience of what it is.
Okay, I will take that first, and then maybe Rob can add some thoughts. I would challenge that notion about experience. They actually do have experience of these things. What differs is the expectation that they go to university and they expect to be hit by lectures. They expect to be sat in an auditorium with being talked at, stand up and spout sort of approach. And so they actually do have experience of similar things, very similar things to ABL, whether it's in lab scenarios, in secondary school scenarios. What we need to address, and what we have addressed through open days and through our literature, is the expectations piece. And that comes from students as well as from parents. And we do say, we are upfront about this. Look, here at Northampton, we have no lecture theatres. Your little Johnny is not going to be sitting in a large space with 200 others receiving some kind of auditory information from a professor at front. The standard mode of teaching here is in smaller groups, typical size 30, in interactive ways where there is activity happening in and outside the classroom. And we are clear about this. In other words, we articulate the ABL definition to them from day one, from the first time they come to an open day. So that would be my take on it. Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've probably covered most of the points actually from there. I mean, obviously students get their information a lot from staff, so it's very much staff understanding it and conceptualizing it in their particular way. And people have taken ABL, and it is flexible, so it does allow for different modes of delivery, and it allows for tutor variants, I think, as well, and that's very much conveyed to the students.
You're muted, Sarah.
Sorry, they've got quite a lot of questions now coming in, actually. So we are running into our tea and coffee break, but I think it's really valuable just to give people opportunities of asking these questions. How are you managing the different time zone differences that are often presented for international students? Are you running zoned synchronous discussions?
Okay, a couple of things to say about that. Most, if not, well, all of the sessions are optional. That's the first point. We do not take attendance for summative purposes at synchronous sessions. So that's item number one. But it's true that when you run a real-time session, for various reasons, you might be excluding groups. So different approaches are being taken to address that, one of which, a very simple one, is to run the session more than once at different points at different times. And And I think we need to bear in mind when we design the course that when we put in real-time sessions, like a Blackboard Collaborate one or a WebEx or a Zoom session, what we need to remember is the purpose of that. Is it really to deliver content? Well, in line with what I said before, it isn't. That's not what a real-time session does best. Real-time sessions are good for group motivation, for group cohesion, for sense of belonging, for assessment review, for feedback, for small group tutorials. That's what real-time sessions are really good at. If you want to run sessions with 150, 200 people to deliver content, then that's not the approach that we've taken, and that's not what we encourage. If people want to do that, well, they could, but that's really not what we're promoting at Northampton.
Yeah, and just to back up that, I think the key points that you mentioned there, Ali, were about it's being optional, being recorded, being repeated, essentially, depending on the setup of the course. I mean, obviously, we've had to move some things very quickly, but I think as we move more now into business as usual situation, then we can look better at the course design now to make sure that all students are getting full benefit from that.
I'm just going to pick up on two final questions, so we do get a chance for people to get their tea and coffee, because I think the discussion could go on a lot longer, Annie and Rob, as you can see. A few questions more about staff working areas in terms of where do academics keep their books? Do you have individual rooms for confidential discussions? And how do you accommodate users with specific ergonomic needs, for example, stand-up desks?
Okay, it's a broad question, so I'll try and cover some of the bits, and then Rob will cover the rest, hopefully. What do I do with my books was a typical question. Let me be clear about this. It is great to have your own little private library in your office. It is fantastic. It gives you the ultimate flexibility and so on and so forth. However, is that clever use of space? Is that clever use of resource? In the Learning Hub, where all academic space is in the new campus, you are within anywhere between 5 and 20 meters away from the actual library. The e-library, you're probably within 2 inches of it on your laptop anyway. Do you really need to have a huge collection of content on your shelves in your office? We did a few experiments before the move, and I've referred to those previously in other sessions like this, and it basically only takes the exercise of picking a book at random from somebody's shelf and ask them, when was the last time you opened this book? And the answer is probably that person who gave me that book was about 12 years ago, and probably haven't touched it since. Now, is that good use of space? The answer to that we had to take is no. So what colleagues did with the books varied from donating them to the library, donating them to charity, very often overseas, and also taking them home. That's what we did. We do not have on the new campus space for individuals' own bookshelves with their own printed material. Rob, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to pick up on the other questions as well, that's sort of related. So yes, there are individual rooms for confidential discussions. So we've got those scattered out, and they are all bookable. And in terms of accommodating people with specific ergonomic needs, then yes, there are stand-up height riser desks, and we're increasing the numbers of those. So we did profiling beforehand just to make sure that everyone got what they needed right from the off, and those are generally reserved for specific people as well.
And the preparations for the move included an extensive DSC exercise that involved all members of staff to ensure that those needs were met on the new campus, despite the open plan arrangements.
very much post-pandemic. We're doing the risk assessments at the moment. We're following all the government guidelines actually in terms of space and desks, making sure everything's safe, reducing the number of staff who actually need to come on site. So many of the teams, including LearnTech team, aren't going to be on site till later this year. So we don't need to come back. We can do stuff remotely. But for some teams that do have to be on site, they will be maintaining all of the guidelines essentially in terms of actually working.
I'm aware there are, continual sort of reflections going on in the chat. I know we're approaching nearly 11 o'clock, and we do need to have a break and get set up for our next session. Before I do, and before I thank Rob and Ali, can I just check if there are any other comments, burning questions from Claire or Jeanette that we needed to pick up on? We have got a plenary session at the end, which Rob is participating in, so we can return to some of these if there are additional questions coming through.
I think most things have been addressed. I'll monitor and bring forward anything unaddressed for the summary session.
Thank you, Claire. Jeanette, anything from your side?
Yeah, no, there's nothing from my side. Yeah, absolutely agree with Claire. Thanks.
Well, can I just give Rob and Ali a virtual round of applause? That was a fantastic session, as you've seen from the number of attendees we've got, the chat, which just hasn't stopped. A huge thank you for sharing your insights and all that excellent work. I know it's sort of inspired, I think, a lot of us in terms of thinking out how we can sort of take forward the issues that we're challenging us at the moment. So thank you very much. We will be breaking now for a virtual tea and coffee. So we'll be reconvening at 11:15. So we will stop the recording now and allow you to get that cup of tea, cup of coffee, and we'll reconvene at 11:15. So thank you.
Capability team working with Sarah. This session is going to be focused on how organisations are supporting staff with digital capabilities. So we have a staff focus for this session, and also helping staff to make the most of the digital environment in the current climate. I've got three wonderful speakers, so I'm not going to say too much at all, and then I'm going to hand over to Kira. So our first speaker will be Kira Duffy from Southwest College, and she's talking about their approach to improving staff and student skills. Our second is Rod Cullen from Manchester Metropolitan University, who's going to be sharing their experiences of using a range of data sources to construct narratives around their staff and student experience. And then last but not least, we have Gordon Duffy McGee from Middlesbrough College, and he's going to be talking about how they're supporting and enhancing staff digital skills in the current situation. So we'll run each of the speakers 10-minute slots, one after the other, and we'll come back at the end for 15 minutes of questions to present to all of the presenters. So just a little reminder, if you're just joining us for the first time, we are recording the session. Please add any questions as we go along in the Q&A box if possible, and we'll try and monitor that as well as the chat and come back to those at the end of the speakers. Okay, so my great pleasure to hand over to Kira.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Lisa, for introducing me. As Lisa said, I'm from Southwest College in Northern Ireland, and I probably maybe speak too quickly. So hopefully I will not do that today, and you'll all be able to hear what I'm trying to get across. So thank you. I'm just going to start the presentation. So last year we moved across to Centre for Excellence in Digital Learning, and one of the key focuses of the strategy is building staff digital capabilities. So we spent quite a bit of time researching in this area to try and find out what was the best framework for moving forward, and we in 17-18 decided to use the Jisc digital skills or capabilities framework for so what we did was we step one, we developed the digital skills capabilities framework. We then piloted the diagnostic tool, and some of you might be familiar with that with staff. We had an excellent response from that. We then developed a toolkit for all staff in the region of, we have probably about 900 staff. We then, through our Teaching and Excellence Forum, we decided that we wanted to accredit this programme as opposed to just building the skills. We would give the staff accreditation, and we couldn't find one on the market that mapped directly to what we wanted to do. So we wrote our own, and we launched that then in 2018, and the staff really welcomed that there. But alongside the digital capabilities qualification, we also ran quite a significant amount of staff development as well. So we then went through the digital leadership program with Jisc, and this is a big plug, I suppose, for Jisc, and they haven't asked me to do this. We rewrote the digital learning strategy, and we launched that in 18-19, with one of the key themes being improving the digital capabilities of staff and students. So that's 2 years ago. This is the framework for the award and the certificate. So again, it consists of 5 modules: information, data and media literacies, digital creation, problem solving and innovation, digital communication, collaboration and participation, digital learning and development, and digital identity and well-being. Now, when we developed this, little did we know that COVID-19 was around the corner. So staff engagement in this programme was very high, and we were and do still deliver a virtual day every year, where we do encourage all our staff to use the digital technologies to build their digital skills. So we have a model for delivery. I have, I suppose, 21 staff in my team. I'm very fortunate I have a big team. That consists of digital mentors for the students, digital learning technologists for the staff, and they do all the staff development across 141 applications currently. We have a significant digital learning and skills academy, which we work very closely with our digital our learning mentors, and they help us co-design and co-develop a significant amount of modules for staff around the whole area of pedagogy, assessment, teaching and learning. We also have quite a lot of and are keen to introduce a lot of new technologies. So we're using VR and AR, and also we have a project on AI as well running. I teach some of the modules. It is all done online. There is none of it done face to face. And we also had developed all our learning resources digitally as well. So we have a complete digital learning resource centre. So I suppose it wasn't just about building the skill set of our teaching staff, it was also about our support staff and also our management staff, so that in the event that we needed to flip the college to a totally online provision, we would have the skill capacity to do that, which is, I suppose, has stood by us in this time of COVID-19 lockdown. When, I suppose, moving fast forward to the present day and the importance of digital skills in today's environment and how it will be so important moving forward, we got an announcement in Northern Ireland that we would shut the college. I think we got told on the 19th of March that we would shut our doors and we would open remotely on the Monday, the 23rd of March. We did a significant amount of staff development in them 3 days. I think we pushed through about 469 staff. We covered all the platforms that we would endorse. We have Canvas as our BLE, Microsoft 365, Teams as our collaboration tool. ClickView we use as video for assessment, near-pod assessment. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with these technologies. But basically on day one, we were able to totally flip all our curriculum, and it was moved online. The first week we had, in terms of class engagement, now we were delivering all our timetable lessons live, and we had something like 10,000 live student engagements in the first week, and that has continued throughout the 8 weeks since we've been delivering online. We still do a significant amount of staff development online currently. We have a digital support help desk running, and where any staff or students have any difficulties at all, we jump on and we deliver staff development very quickly to them to keep them moving forward. I suppose the importance of building the digital capabilities of the staff was that they were able to deliver and are continuing to deliver all their lessons online. All their assessments, all their face-to-face assessments had to be flipped into an online assessment model. They were capable of doing that with support of ourselves. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the amount of work that goes into skilling up our staff in this whole area of digital skills, but that it has been absolutely fundamental and critical to ensure that we continue as a college to deliver the best learning experience we can for our students during this COVID-19 lockdown, and also moving forward in the future. Some staff did think that I was responsible for COVID-19 introduced, but I can categorically say I wasn't. And that we have, I suppose, seen the benefits of all the work and energy that our staff have put into over the years to preparing for us to be able to deliver everything online. So that's, I think, my 10 minutes up. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen and pass it over maybe back to Lisa. Is that my 10 minutes up, Lisa?
Thank you, Kira. Thank you very much. We'll hand straight over to Rob to pick up, but as I mentioned, please do pop in any questions into the Q&A box so that we can pick them up for Kira at the end.
Thank you, everybody.
Over to you, Rod.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me okay, Lisa. I'm just sharing my screen now.
That's perfect. Thanks, Rod.
Bear with me a sec. Is that okay? Can you see that okay, Lisa?
Yeah, that's working great.
Okay, lovely. So what I'm going to sort of describe really is an ongoing process that we've had for staff and student engagement, and how we've constructed some narratives around the staff and student experience of using technology in learning, teaching, assessment. I'll try and articulate how that has sort of prepared us reasonably well for the shift online and some of the challenges that we have going forward. I think I'll start by saying that engaging more effectively with staff and students has become sort of a major part of our team's work. And we've really set out to gain a better understanding how the digital technologies are employed in teaching, learning and assessment practice within the institution. But in line with that, sort of what's the actual staff and student experience of those technologies like, particularly those that the institution specifically provides, with a view to working more collaboratively with our staff and students to try and improve and shape the future of our digital provision. With that in mind, we've sort of engaged in sort of a broad range of data collection and collaborative activities. We've put a lot of time and effort into that with both staff and students. I think the key thing that I would highlight is we've tried to provide a lot of opportunities to contribute through free text, open questions and conversational engagements. So although we recognise the value of kind of surveying staff, it only tells you so much of the story. So to that end, we added free text questions to our internal student survey, asking students about the best experiences that they have during their course and the things that are most in need of improvement on the programs and units that they take. We've added three open text questions to our staff insight survey around how we might improve our virtual learning environment, how we can improve our teaching spaces, and how we can better provide CPD for our staff. And to drill down even further than that, once we'd analysed our staff insights survey, we undertook a series of follow-up conversational focus groups to drill down into some of the themes that emerged from that. And that was a really valuable experience. And a final thing that we did is we worked closely with our institutional technology enhanced learning advisors who work in collaboration with academic staff to develop a series of sort of narrative scenarios around how they're actually utilizing technologies in the classroom, so that the types of teaching activities that they're trying to deliver and how they're supported utilizing technology. And to try and pull all of that together, we've developed a a reasonably consistent approach to thematic analysis. So we can look at the themes as they emerge across all of those different data sources. And essentially we're at the point where we have an awful lot of data. And within that, we've got some common and conflicting narratives. What I mean by that is that often staff and students tell us slightly different stories about the same thing. But also different groups of staff tell us slightly different stories about the same thing. So we've got this sort of quite complex picture and some examples of narratives within narratives, if that makes any sense. So the key sets of narratives that we've drawn out of this, there are 6 overall around the overall satisfaction and reliability of our technology, the technology and how it's used in our teaching spaces, our Moodle ecosystem. We refer to it as the Moodle ecosystem because although people refer to it as Moodle, there's a lot of things that sit behind that. So we have an integrated library system, we have an integrated assessment management system, but they're all perceived as being Moodle, whereas in reality they're different systems. We have a narrative around staff's desire to use technology and their personal beliefs about the utilisation of technology. We have some narratives around the strategic guidance that's required. And we also have an emerging narrative around the perceived value of technology to support learning. So they kind of split broadly into 2 sort of groups. One group which is, I guess, technically and operational, and the other which is more human and conceptual. Important to remember these narratives don't stand alone. There is a complex interplay between them. And one of the things that we're learning is that an individual's beliefs can certainly impact upon their perception of the technical issues and complexity of the technical issues that they encounter. So I don't have time to explore all of those in any detail, but I just wanted to kind of try and demonstrate how we're finding these narratives are a very powerful way to provide feedback to staff and students on our findings, but also of articulating issues to senior colleagues and feeding into the key strategic projects that we have across the institution. So our second narrative is around teaching spaces, and this is a sort of an example of how we're kind of presenting this to colleagues within the institution. So we found from our work that teaching spaces are well designed, are not perceived as being well designed for use with technology. We've got kind of low level of agreement in that respect. And when we look at the sort of the standard institutional data, part of that is to do with the software that's available to staff to use in those teaching spaces. Some of it is related to the perceptions of the reliability of the audio and visual equipment that's available to them. We're clearly seeing a reluctance to utilize technology by a significant proportion of our staff. So for example, nearly 40% of our staff have never used any kind of polling or quizzing in classroom situation. That tells us a certain part of the story, but when we drill into that using our free text questions and our focus groups, the key sort of meat that we can put onto the bones, if you like, is that the real key is that there is a perception that our spaces are inconsistent and inflexible, and some colleagues describe themselves as being at the mercy of the timetabling. So if I want to teach in a sort of the type of active blended learning model that Ali and colleagues talked about in Northampton, that's very dependent upon the space that they find themselves placed in. And our timetabling is almost exclusively based on how many students you've got and how many seats are in the room, rather than the type of teaching that you want to engage in. There's also although we've got kind of a high level of confidence in the reliability of the institutional systems like Wi-Fi and the virtual learning environment, there's a perceived risk about using technology that is not provided by the institution. And we don't provide a very wide-ranging kit for staff. So things like the use of Padlet, for example, staff have to set up their own accounts. There are issues around staff paying for their own licenses and things like that. And then short-term changes to terms and conditions. So probably all aware of the changes with Padlet very recently. When we looked at our classroom technology review, it was clear that there were 5 main types of activity that staff want to engage in, and we're a little bit short in terms of being able to map all of the all of the types of activities to tools that we're providing for staff within the institution. But this key issue here is that there is a risk associated with utilising tools that are not provided by the institution, and that's given us an awful lot to think about. From our students' perspective, the tools are probably less important than their desire to be more actively involved in their teaching. We get lots of comments for students that they don't want to be read at in lessons. They don't want to just have somebody turn up and read PowerPoint slides. However, the use of technology is only part of that, and a lot of it is down to the pedagogic approach that people are adopting in their teaching. So just to kind of finish off, I hope I've still got some time left. The key narratives that we've got, we're able to articulate them in such a way that they can feed into a pre-COVID-19 a range of key technologies that we had. So our classroom technology review, our upgrade to our virtual learning environment, our shifts forward with electronic management of assessment, and an emerging digital education strategy, which was focused around the four narratives, 4, 5, and 6, around staff's desire to utilise technology, the need for strategic guidance, and developing a value in the perception of the use of technology. Our response to COVID-19, initially, we went online very, very quickly. We were able to do that because we had good technological infrastructure, and we pushed forward with a very simple mantra to staff, which was to keep things simple, make sure that your key provision is in the virtual learning environment, that it's structured, it's clear, it's task orientated, and to use any live technologies. So within 2 days, we'd incorporated a web conferencing tool within the virtual learning environment called Neuro Live Rooms, but to utilize those, not to shift your teaching, your lectures into the live online environment, but to use those to give students an opportunity to seek additional guidance, to get reassurance, and for kind of feedback on tasks that were in hand, rather than shifting teaching online. Rather than going to sort of large live lecture type delivery. All of that has now been pulled together into what we're calling our accelerated digital education program. There are 4 key elements to that. We're trying to enhance our virtual learning environment by further integration of Neuro Live Rooms and Microsoft Teams. We plan to shift to a 6-week block teaching mode in September, and split all of our students into 20 student learning bubbles that they will follow through that 6-week period. So that's part of our sort of tracking system. We have a cross-cutting thread, which is staff and student digital literacy, which is linked to developing a specific institutional delivery model. And the key aim of that will be to redesign courses for a high level of remote delivery, and not to attempt to mirror current face-to-face teaching practice. So hopefully I haven't gone too much over time there, Lisa, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, Rod. And so many interesting questions about I wanted to know much more about all of those narratives. So thank you for giving us a brief introduction to some of those, and hopefully we can pick up towards the end of the session.
No problem. I'll just stop sharing now.
Wonderful. So our final speaker is Gordon Duffy McGee, who's speaking from Middlesbrough College around their approaches to enhancing teachers' digital skills. So I'll hand over to Gordon.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I find myself in a slightly different position to most of the other speakers, in that we're very much in a discovery phase. I think if I'm going to talk about anything today, it's going to be about perception and reality, and where we thought we were and where we are actually in light of post-COVID experiences. I think as a college, we're a large FE colleges. We've got numerous apprentices. We've got an international strand as well, and we deliver lots of different courses. And we've been delivering online learning, inverted commas, for a number of years, and that's been in the distance learning model. Students have accessed a portion of their curriculum online during the week, completed activities, fed them back to staff through the Canvas VLE, and staff have been quite confident with that. I think a gestalt moment for me, if I may say, it was the post-COVID webinar that Jisc ran. And I'm pretty sure it was colleagues at Northampton who spoke about the need to move from remote emergency delivery to authentic online learning. And since we stopped face-to-face teaching on about the 18th of March, we've been doing some what we call virtual learning walks. We've been dropping in on teachers' virtual lessons and just seeing what was actually being used. And what was very, very clear is that we were remote emergency delivering, if you like, that we were pushing content mainly through asynchronous means. The synchronous sessions were staff talking through the content that they'd previously posted, and students were doing relatively low-level, repetitious review and recap tasks. And that's probably because of the time of year that we were in. Obviously, in A-levels, we've got a lot of students who are just about to finish off or progress from year 1 to year 2. Some of the assessments for the BTEC courses of the technical qualifications, they were not allowed to be formally summatively assessed. And so staff were, I think, as much reflex rather than design in terms of their teaching provision. So what we were seeing were lots of digital well-being, lots of linking up with students, making sure students were well, were safe, keeping that connection going between the teacher themselves and the students. But what we didn't actually see in very many cases was that authentic online delivery. And by that, I mean a true pedagogical approach to how online delivery differs from, I think Ali talked about it earlier at Northampton, that distance learning model, where I will access some resources, read a chapter, and then meet up with you online to talk through it. And we're in that quite sort of blunt, flipped mode, where people were being sent resources to look at and search through, and perhaps do some low-level work on before a bit of digital catch-up with the teacher and their friends, and it was just kept keeping things ticking over. I think we're acutely aware now that as a college, we need to be in a different place. But also, I think it's been worthwhile taking some time to look at what we were doing and where staff perceptions are, as opposed to the reality of where we need to be. And this brings us to the Jisc slide, really, and the 6 competencies that we've put staff through. We've got all of the reports in for most of our staff. We've got about 900 staff in different sections of curriculum delivery. Most of the competency levels vary. Some are very, very high, some are very, very low. So we're faced with a cruel decision, really, that our current digital strategy, which was only created in 2018, is no longer fit for purpose. Whatever the new normal is, and it's a horrible phrase, but I'm sure we're going to have to live with it at least until Christmas and probably beyond. So how do we, in this very, very short window of opportunity, and I'm sort of talking June through to the start of hopefully our new term in September, how do we start to prepare staff for online delivery in some form? And I know we're using that word online delivery again, but there's got to be some of that authenticity to the way staff start to view what they do. Because our fear is that we just go back to pushing resources, transmitting content, to coin Ali's phrase, in an asynchronous delivery style, and it's based on existing resources and existing content, and we're not really in a position yet to alter that, to reflect that, to hone that, or to make any substantial changes, really, partly because the staff don't have the skills. So we're looking at launching a CPD initiative in sort of 2 phases. The first will be a bit of an emergency measure. It will take place between June and September, and it will be to give a pedagogical underpinning to online delivery or remote delivery, whatever phrase you'd like to use. And it will look at, for teachers and assessors, 5 of those 15 elements contained within the 6 Jisc activities. So there'll be digital teaching, digital learning, digital problem solving, and communication and collaboration. They'll be the sorts of things that we will ask all teachers to focus on, and we're going to seek to, I suppose Kira's approach was really, really interesting in that they've got a pre-designed program they can put stuff on. We didn't want to spend too much time creating new resources. So we've taken a curation approach, and we're going to look at some of the really, really excellent resources that have been coming out of the sector. ETF have done some stuff, the Open University, the LinkedIn that's been mentioned, and see if we can repurpose some of those resources to give staff that quick introduction to digital pedagogy. So we're going to particularly look at the Open University short Open Learn course of Take Your Learning Online as an underpinning step, and get all staff to undertake some of that study and complete that program before September. From September onwards, we're then going to take a badged approach, and we're going to work on, I think we've called it Digital Explorer is the first level, Digital Pioneer is the next level, and Digital Innovator is our third level, to give staff some sort of motivator and incentive to earn digital as well as physical badges, and then work through phased tools, soft, hard and design skill sets. Because we're very aware that we've started to throw 1 million platforms. It's been mentioned by colleagues earlier. Lots of our students were moving from Zoom to Canvas to Google to Teams to OneNote, and it wasn't a pleasant experience for some, and it wasn't a consistent experience in terms of successful teaching and learning. So we want to try and bring that back in house a bit. We're a Microsoft college, and we use Canvas VLE. But we are aware we have some outlying departments that use Google Education, but we want to bring that in, and so we do some CPD for staff based on what are the essential tools that you need to do to communicate synchronously and asynchronously with students. What are the collaboration tools that you can use within those platforms to do what Ali referred to earlier as that active online learning, or that process of creating and collaborating in real time with others, with peers, with the tutors, and with the resources that are made available. And we'll do that in a slightly different way through Teams, Microsoft Education Learning Pathways. So we're looking at the MIE program. For Google staff, we're looking at the Elements Fundamentals program. And for our assessors, we're going to put them through the Smart Assessor Champion program, so that everybody's got something that they can work on in the long term, if you like. And then once they've built up those hard skills, we're going to do some in-house CPD for staff, looking at the softer skills. So how do you manage an online session? How do you stimulate response from people? There was a lovely cartoon there with the discussion. That's probably what we've been seeing in our delivery up to now, is lots of quite placid responses to a question and lots of thumbs and agreeing and liking, but we haven't really seen any depth, and we haven't seen, again, what Ali at Northampton referred to as that critique level coming into our online sessions. So we're going to look at some of those softer skills on how staff can better manage their synchronous time with students. And then we're going to look at the design and the pedagogical side of it. And I was really, really interested to look at Northampton's planning tools, because we've been spending a lot of time changing the way we deliver our or look at our scheme of work and our lesson plans, and finding a way that we can help staff think about the technologies that they use that are most appropriate for the activities that they need to engage in. And so we're a work in progress. I have no, I apologize for not having any finished slides, but we've just realized that we need to throw out what we had and what we thought was going to work moving forward, and come up with a new workable version that staff can A, get to grips with very, very quickly, but B, start to make progress over time. Because I don't think, all of us would agree that we're not going to be in the same place moving forward, really. And that's about all I wanted to say. I'm not sure on time, or Lisa will tell me if I've got more time to spend. But I think going back to to some of the Northampton points, getting a clear view of where your strategy is now and what you need to do with it is certainly been key for us.
Thank you, Gordon. That's perfect timing. So thank you very much to all the speakers we've had today for keeping one such perfect time and also giving us such a rich picture of their very diverse experiences. And certainly no need to apologise for the stage you're at in the journey, because I think we've had a really nice selection of different experiences from people that are all different stages. So we've heard, I think, around 2 different approaches for preparing staff in the current environment around their digital skills, and also another around the use of data to start to inform strategies moving forwards around handling the current crisis. So thank you very much to all 3. We have some questions in the Q&A box, so we'll start with those, and we're in good time to cover all of them. So Nikki has asked Kira, a great idea for engagement. Can the OCN Northern Ireland qualification be used by anyone? What level is it at? And do you have any more information that you can share?
Yes, it can be used from anyone. Because we've just completed our first tranche of staff going through it. I think we've over 80 staff have completed it now. We are offering it out now to any other providers, organisations, educational organisations that want to take it. So I can forward on the information regarding that there. It's taught fully online, and you can either do it by module or by award or by certificate. And it covers all sorts of all the modules that I mentioned there and sitting on the screen in front of us, and it aligns directly to your organisation and what you endorse as the main platforms. For us, we push our staff under, I suppose, from a safeguarding point of view, that they have to use our endorsed college systems, which is Teams for collaboration and communication, Canvas for our VLE, and Blackboard Collaborate for our main live classroom. So it's just, I suppose, reflecting back that on some of the comments that was just made there, that there is a plethora of applications and software out there that staff can use, but we have definitely taken a very structured approach, and we dictate or mandate what staff are allowed to use, and it's underpinning the safeguarding policy for online, so that we can protect both our staff and our students. So the qualification is there. We are offering it out now, and I will send Lisa in some more information if anybody wants to, or email me directly. I can send it. I can send you more information through. Hopefully that answered the question.
Wonderful, thank you. Nikki's also asked about how many staff you have in the college. I think appreciating your team size.
We have about 900 staff, and just in terms of the teaching, we have about 565 teaching staff. And the qualification is directly for the teaching staff. We have wrote a qualification for support staff and for management. And I suppose we have taken a structured and an unstructured approach to staff development. We still run all our staff development where they don't have to get accreditation and they just gain a digital badge. But for those that want the accreditation, we then have this qualification available for them to undertake. So it's a two-prong approach to building digital capacity.
Wonderful. Can you just remind us how many digital technologies you have at your end?
Yes, I have 3 digital mentors which directly support the students, and then I have 3 digital learning technologists which directly support the staff. We are a rural college and we have 5 sites, so we have 1 per site, one per site for our main sites, and then I have software developers on my team, a games developer and content developers, and as well I bring in subject specialists as and when we are designing content for a specific area. So it's a very multifaceted team that supports the whole organisation.
And just a final question, Kira, what was your strategy for getting all staff on board to develop digital skills?
I suppose we've been on this journey for quite a long time, and we have, I suppose, quickly in 2010 we shut the whole college down and ran a virtual week. And that was due to weather conditions. From that there, we built the technology, the infrastructure that would support online delivery in the event that we had to shut the college down again. That was 10 years ago. For every year then we've ran a virtual day to ensure that staff have got the, can remotely work and do have the skills. So the strategy for us was to retain them skills that they had, but also move them forward with the new platforms that they have, so that across all our organisation, and that's the support services, finance, HR, every single person within the organisation has to have a level of digital skills, a basic level of digital skills, which will allow them to operate effectively in a digital environment. So that is, I suppose, the main thinking behind it, that we could always operate in the event that we couldn't come into the physical college. So that has always underpinned our strategy, and I suppose has we've gained a lot of that then when we moved over into the COVID-19 situation. Our staff seen that as a seamless transition because they had the skills. But I suppose what we're looking at now is taking that up a big level in terms of re-engineering a lot of our labs. We are a vocational college. We've got joiners, builders, engineers, hairdressers, beauty therapists, so they need a lot of lab work. So we're looking to see how we can recreate that online and ensure, again, it's always like the learning experience of the student is as good, if not better, online than it would be in the face-to-face environment. But at no stage do we ever advocate replacing the teacher in the classroom, be it online or face-to-face. And I think that has supported and encouraged a lot of staff, that they didn't see it as a replacement of them in the classroom. They've seen it as fundamental to what we do and how we move forward.
Thank you, Kira. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll make sure that we share any resources that you share back with us with the wider community as well, because obviously there's a lot of interest in those. So thank you. A question for Gordon. Who's delivering your CPD initiative, and would you be able to share these resources, and how many people are developing that for you?
We have a team of 4 e-learning teams, including 1 digital content creator. But as I think I mentioned, we're looking to curate rather than create. So the digital learning team, e-learning team, will look at examining what resources are actually out there and how they map across most appropriately to the 6 elements and the 15 elements and the 6 activities within the Jisc capability program. So we're looking at that at the moment. We're not actually going to invest a great deal of time in getting staff delivering to other staff, if you like. We're going to look at first getting staff to undertake some online study with an existing program, and that will hopefully give them that sense of what is it like from the student point of view. And then through a series of webinars, we're going to introduce some of the tools that Kira was talking about within the platforms that we push as a college and that we subscribe to. And then throughout the year, we'll look at leveling those CPD activities up so that staff can demonstrate and evidence. And I notice it came through as a question for Kira, but we are asking governors tomorrow, in fact, to make it a mandatory program. And we want to build it into staff's performance review to ensure that everyone is up to the same level of competency, really.
Thank you. And just a couple of final questions, I think, for Kira, but thank you for Gordon for also clarifying how that works for your college, in terms of how you ensure, Kira, that staff have those digital skills, and do you have a mandatory development? Is it part of performance management?
It's not part of performance management, because when we did 2 years ago introduce the qualification, we wanted staff to volunteer to undertake it, and not, although we say we mandate, it's not compulsory, so it's more voluntary. We did have a wee bit of kickback from the unions if we made it mandatory, so we stepped down from that stance, and then we just said that it is part of your delivery to enhance your skill set, and for those staff that wanted to step up and undertake it, accredited program, it was entirely up to themselves. So we, that sort of, it's more, you can do it, but because it's part of basically our DNA within our college that you have to have these skills and competencies to do your job, staff put themselves forward for staff development, they seek us out as opposed to us going to them. So it's very much a collaborative approach in terms of how we engage with staff. And we see that we're adding value to their skills as opposed to something they have to do. And it's all about the student learning experience, giving the students a better experience. And if we have the skills to do that there, then the student experience is enhanced.
No, that's fabulous and so critical, isn't it, to make sure, one, it's coming bottom up and that staff really understand the why, which sounds as if you've really got, you know, got cracked, but also that link back up into those high level HR issues around appraisal, so that there's a continual flow. And I really did like, Gordon, too, your approach to reward and recognition, again, as another way of getting that staff engagement. So Kira, just before we finish, there's a couple of quick questions. So one, how many content developers do you have? And two, how do you assess that staff have the basic level required?
So I have 3 content developers as well, at quite high grade, and they QA all of the content that's on our VLE. So we have several strategies. We look for free resources if and when available. We look at what we can create ourselves, co-create with our subject specialists. And if we can't create our source, we then purchase. So it's a sort of a 3-pronged approach: free if available and good enough. We've quite a stringent quality assurance in terms of our content, and we have a standardization across all levels, across all curriculum areas, in terms of what we deem passing our quality assurance in terms of digital content, because obviously it has to, you know, pass accessibility as well. So we very much are the drivers in terms of the whole teaching resources that's up there on our learning platforms, and we QA all of that there, work and audit it, and then work with staff to ensure that it's of a standard that it needs to be.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Sorry, we've given you a bit of a grilling. That's perfect. I think we just have one final question as well from with a raised hand. So this is from Sonia Campbell at Glasgow Caledonian University. I'll just hand you the mic there. Sonia, can you speak okay? Okay, maybe there's an issue with audio from Sonia, so apologies. If you did want to add your question into the chat, Sonia, please do. And I think it's now probably time just to move on to our next break. I won't do that before thanking again Kira, Gordon and Rod for sharing their experiences. We'll be back at 1 p.m. And again, another virtual applause. So thank you all. See you at 1 o'clock.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Lisa.
Ruth Cameron from Newcastle in Australia. And she's going to talk to us about how she has implemented the digital capability framework for students within her university. And I hope she might also be able to give us a little bit of context about the current experience that her and her colleagues are going through in Australia, because we have done a lot of work on the digital experience insights work with Australian universities and New Zealand universities. And so there's lots of interesting things that we can compare and contrast. And it's great that we've got good collaborative links with institutions out there. So thank you very much, Ruth, for joining us today. I know it's early evening or middle of the evening for you, so we're very grateful for you to spare your out of hours time with us. And then after Ruth, we have Joel from the University of Surrey, and he and his team that he will introduce are going to talk about introducing students to the digital capability online. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Ruth from Newcastle in Australia.
Thank you, Ruth. Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be sharing with you today. I will just share my screen and bring my slides up. There we are. Okay, so the way our Student Digital Capabilities Framework came about is that in 2018, our library was asked to comment on a new education framework which was being established, and we suggested that it should include digital capabilities. So of course, we got the job of forming a framework to do that. Now you'll see from my first slide that it is talking about equity. Now, why and how would we include equity in a student digital capabilities framework? We are a regional university. We're quite small, but we have very close ties to our regional communities, and a lot of our students and staff, for that matter, come from rural communities. So they may not have the access to the internet, devices, and other things that some students take for granted. We also have a higher percentage of enabling pathways students coming to our university than other institutions in Australia, and we have the highest percentage of Indigenous students not only enrolling but graduating in Australia. So we wanted to keep that coming through in our framework and make sure that it aimed for equal opportunities for all University of Newcastle students to achieve the digital capabilities that they need. So in our policy document for the framework, we included an equity statement, which was a bold proposal for the university to ensure those opportunities for students, no matter the instruction method they prefer, their level of ability, their age, their gender, their socioeconomic background, or indeed any other point of difference. Our next pillar for our framework is employability. One of the points of the framework was that it would allow students to articulate their digital capabilities to employers. So we did extensive research into government reports and industry reports from Australia and overseas. And what we found is that employers want graduates with more than just the basic digital capabilities. They want graduates with deep discipline knowledge and also the knowledge of how to apply digital capabilities to that discipline. So our framework was based around three areas. We had a graduate statement, which basically set out for each capability. This is based on the Jisc framework, obviously, as well. I didn't say that before. The graduate statement of what we would expect our students to have achieved in that digital capability by the time they graduate. We also had an informed evidence-based statement of what future employers will require in relation to that capability, and then that was followed by practical examples of what the capability might look like, and they were based on the Jisc learner profiles, which were invaluable. So an example of one of our employability statements to do with data literacy is that graduates will require the analytical skills to manipulate and interpret big data. They will need to be familiar with the processes of system thinking and recognition of patterns and how these contribute to targeted decision making and policy. So we didn't create the framework on our own, thank goodness. We involved all of our stakeholders. When we were creating the framework, we formed an advisory group which included staff from each faculty, student services, careers, and the library. And they helped to give us broad perspectives when we were writing the framework itself. We also ran the Digital Experience Insights survey for students and academic staff in October last year, just to give us some more evidence to support the framework's relevance and necessity. And now that we've moved into the implementation phase of the project, which is the hardest part, we've formed a working group. The emphasis is on working, which is why we have the lovely picture of bees. This includes staff from every faculty, once again, student services and careers, the library, IT services, learning design and teaching innovation, pathways and academic support, our Indigenous executive, and student representatives. So we now have our framework and we want to make sure that it grows into something amazing. We have had some wins. we were talking about making a digital capabilities portal, which would be a one-stop shop for resources and support for students and staff. And we'd been tossing up about the platform, and then suddenly COVID-19 hit, and we had to make a very rapid executive decision. And in hours, we had created a LibGuide containing generic resources like tutorials in Word, Excel, and Zoom to support students when we suddenly went into lockdown. We also wanted to support institution-wide courses in Microsoft tools, time management and planning software, etc. And we have just learned that our DVC academic has approved an enterprise-wide site license for LinkedIn Learning. So we're still going through the purchasing phase for that, and then we're expecting to be able to offer that service for the next 3 years for students and staff, and we hope to make that an ongoing service. We're also looking at mapping these digital capabilities into courses across the university so that they become discipline and subject specific. We've begun mapping. I've worked with one of the lecturers who redesigned the science course, and we mapped her the 2 core courses for first year science. She has referred me to other members of staff, and so we've also created guidelines for implementation, for mapping, which means that our implementation group members can follow those steps and they can help staff members to map the digital capabilities into courses as well. The library has created online tutorials and resources that can be embedded into Blackboard to support information and data literacies. And along with the implementation phase of the student framework, we're also creating a staff framework, because we can't ask the staff to teach the students when the staff don't have the capabilities themselves. So we're going to phrase that in similar terms to the student framework, and it's going to be for academic and professional staff. And now for our wish list, which is very long, so I'll only give you a little bit. We really want a self-assessment tool like the Jisc discovery tool, and we want that to be available through our digital capabilities portal, again for students and staff, so that they can give themselves a baseline of where their capabilities are at to begin with, and then they can use it as a reflection tool later on once they've achieved some of these digital capabilities. We really want academic staff to list the digital capabilities that they expect their students to have before they begin the course, and we're hoping to integrate that work in with the mapping of the digital capabilities. We want to identify duplication within programs. Now, one point of view is that if the content is tailored enough, students shouldn't have to repeat a digital capability within a program of study. That's fine until you get students who are doing a double degree or elective subjects. So we're going to have to identify some way of removing duplication if possible. We also want to develop the digital capabilities in a contextualised way so that they are relevant to industry and future employers. And that's where we really have to bring in our staff from careers and use them to reach out to industry and employers. And finally, we really want student digital champions to provide support for other students, but also to provide support for staff. And they could work in support groups across the university. And, you know, all sorts of other things like micro-credentialing. That would be wonderful. But I will stop there, and thank you very much.
That's fantastic, Ruth. Thank you very much. It's so interesting to hear your context and the similarities and differences between some of our institutions. So Joel, would you like to take over presenting your slides and then introduce your team that you've got with you today? So we're delighted to have so many of your colleagues here. And Joel is going to talk about how they have introduced students to the digital capability online at the University of Surrey. So over to you, Joel.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ruth. So yeah, my name is Joel. I am a student at the University of Surrey and also an education intern, and you'll find a bit more about what that is in a moment. But I'm joined today by Cara and Jessica, who are also fellow students and interns, and also Irina, who is the person at Surrey who deals with all things digital capabilities, as well as Sam, who is the academic lead we've been working with. They will introduce themselves in a few moments. So what we've been doing is really thinking about how can we tailor the introduction of what actual digital capabilities really are to students directly. And we've done that via a workshop on Zoom just around about a month ago. And so, yeah, we want to walk you through a little the context which we've developed this workshop in and how we've tailored it to the students we've been working with, the workshop itself, and also how it fits into that bigger picture of the student learning. So I'll pass over to Irina first to discuss some of the context.
Great. Thanks, Joel, and also thanks, Ruth. That was a really inspiring presentation. So I'm Irina Niculescu. I work at Surrey University in the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning. And just to give you a bit of the wider context, we've had the Jisc digital capability service up and running for about 3 months now. So at the start of their placement, about September, October time, I was so excited to introduce to Joel, Cara, Jessica, and a few of the other interns the digital capabilities framework, and also the discovery tool. And it's not an exact word by word quote, but paraphrasing, they said to me that it's useful, but they wouldn't really use it in their free time. You can imagine I was a bit sad when I heard that, but equally in parallel, I was really excited that we have the chance to introduce this at Surrey through a partnership with students. So in parallel, Sam and I were having some conversations about a module that she's teaching on, where digital capabilities as lifelong skills would be really useful. So then we basically formed a project team, and we soon found that Sam, working alongside the interns, just managed to create a workshop and adapted it so that it can run fully online, following a really nice, just like a partnership. And thinking about my wish list, again, Ruth, I really liked how you introduced that. I think for the future, I'd really like to continue exploring student-led approaches at Surrey and just across the sector when it comes to introducing digital capabilities, and also see how we can go beyond this binary of free time or embedded in the curriculum, especially given that now we have this situation that requires us to work online and collaborate online like never before. Before I move on to handing over to Sam, just gonna say just a few words about the Edu Interns model that we have at Surrey. This is the second year where we have a group of students, 6 students this year, doing their placement year in the education office. So that means that we take every opportunity that we can to collaborate with them as partners in an equitable way to introduce learning and teaching initiatives. Thank you. So I'm gonna hand over to Sam now.
Okay, so I work on a brand new foundation year at Surrey for the biosciences. The students are our home students that are taken on in a foundation year that then runs into one of 9 strands within the bioscience umbrella. The model at Surrey for foundation years is set up so that on each foundation year there's a learning developer like me who's embedded within the programme, but I have a biology background, so as well as the learning development, I have some understanding of the biology. So that means that I can take the learning development and try and weave it into the subject knowledge a little bit. When I was given the documentation around this new foundation year, there were outcomes, aims that were all around this digital literacy, digital capabilities. So lots about analysis of data, analysis of information, developing skills in communication, independent learning, self-awareness, down to things like highlighting certain online tools and digital capabilities that would support their transition into their first year, because that's pretty much what a foundation year is. It's to help them make that step into the first year. So when Irina and I first chatted, we chatted very broadly, and then I sat down with the Edu interns and we managed to pinpoint a few, because it's such a broad topic. We managed to pinpoint a few things that I thought would be key. And I picked the kind of information literacy side of things, and also the digital wellbeing side of things, to introduce the tool to the students. The reason being, I thought these were probably the parts of the tool that students would see as most relevant. They'd see the point to it, so it would help them step into it much easier. It would be a much easier transition.
Thank you, Sam. So now we're going to quickly run through briefly what the workshop actually was. As you can see, here's a quick outline, but then yeah, I'll hand over to Cara, one of the other interns.
Hi everyone. So yeah, at the start of the session, after our initial introductions, we created a word cloud using Poe Everywhere and asked the students, what do digital capabilities mean to you, to gather their initial thoughts and ideas. As you can see from the slide, words such as technology, online skills and literacy came up quite frequently. Next, we showed them an animation video from the University of Derby about what are digital capabilities and why they are so important. This video is also available in the Jisc resource bank. We then discussed some subject-specific examples. I'll pass you over to Jessica now.
We did 3 short activities during the information literacy. The first activity was about referencing. We used the Poe Everywhere to create a referencing themed quiz with questions such as what is the right in-text citation, how to write a bibliography. The second activity is about the reliability of sources. We put all the students into breakout rooms, let them to have a short discussion, and order the source from the most reliable to the least reliable. The image on this slide shows their answers from this activity. The third activity is about Wikipedia. We used a Wikipedia link as an example to show the students how easily and frequently people can edit it. We also discussed the reliability of the references the page used. Due to the COVID-19, everyone is experiencing a hard time. We put students into breakout rooms and encourage everyone to share their tips on digital well-being. For example, it is important to take regular breaks when you are working from home or taking online courses. We then brought the students back to the main session and share their ideas from breakout rooms. And then let's head over to Joe.
Thank you, Jessica. So yeah, I think the important thing is really tailoring things to these students in particular as bioscience foundation year students, and tailoring different activities to them. And then what we did after that was introducing them to the Jisc discovery tool and the framework in general, and looking at what different resources are available, and the self-assessment tool, and really giving them an opportunity to explore for themselves. And yeah, that was most of the workshop. And then we wrapped it up at the end by asking them the same question as at the start. What do digital capabilities mean to you? And it was great to see how over the course of the hour and a half long workshop, they'd grown to understand different aspects of what digital capabilities can be. And I'll finally hand over to Sam.
So this, because of the luxury I have of being able to weave this into all aspects of the programme, so this wasn't a standalone workshop. This then got weaved into an e-portfolio that the students had been doing the whole year, where they're reflecting on certain aspects of their course, and into tasks they're being asked to do. Actually, right at this moment, they're doing research essays, which what we covered in this workshop absolutely is important about. So it really did fit nicely, and that was what's so lovely to work with the Edu interns, was that it just fitted the course and the students so well.
that's everything from us. Thank you so much for having us.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. It's such a delight to hear from students as well as staff about what they're doing, and how you can really reach out to your peers and get them to recognise the importance of this topic. And I think that's a really nice segue through to our last member voice this afternoon, Louise from Canterbury Christ Church University, because she is going to talk about how they help prepare their students for the world of work. So Louise, I hope you can take over the slide share and talk us about your excellent work at Canterbury Christ Church. Great, so we can see the slides there, Louise. I hope your mic is working okay. And then please, others.
Can you hear me now?
Remember that. Yes, that's great. Thank you very much, Louise.
Good.
And others, please add questions into your the question and answer, and we'll take all of those at the end of Louise's presentation. So off you go.
Okay, so we're coming, hello everybody, my name is Louise Gotch and I am a Grad Force project manager, which will all be explained in a moment. My colleague Susan Odev will also be chatting in a second, and we're coming from a careers and enterprise perspective today, and talking about how we're what we have done and what we are planning in terms of working with our students and to develop their digital capabilities. And a lot of this is based on our talking to students and employers, because my project works with employers as well. So I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Susan, who's Head of Employability and Skills, Canterbury Christ Church, and I'll take over from her after that.
Okay, hi, I hope everybody can hear me. If Louise can just say if you can hear me or not, that would be good.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right, hi, yeah, I'm Susan Odev and I'm the Head of Employability and Skills at Canterbury Christ Church University. And what we wanted to do for this presentation is have a look at how the Grad Force project fits into our overall frameworks that are around learning and teaching, with particular emphasis on employability. Last year, we developed a new framework that we lovingly call the Working On framework, but it's really known as Future 360. The idea that we take a holistic approach to student employability and enterprise education, so that students are constantly looking at themselves and their potential and their future. And that this sits underneath our learning and teaching strategy and our mission statement, which is that students from Canterbury Christ Church will leave as enterprising professional graduates. We're very aware that the world is uncertain, and we were thinking that before it became as uncertain as it is now. So we were kind of a bit ahead of the game, and we were thinking very clearly that what we wanted to do was make sure that our students were equipped with a passion for lifelong learning and development and self-development, and that to do that one needed to first be aware of what you bring to the party. A number of our students are quite mature students. We have quite a mature demographic of students. We also have a very high number of widening participation students, and many of our students are already work ready, in that sense that many of them have had jobs in the past, or they currently still have jobs. In fact, many of our students are working full-time jobs whilst they're studying full-time with us as well. So we wanted to be sure that what we were doing was developing a professionalism amongst our students and an awareness that their degrees are preparing them for the next phase of their lives in whatever shape or form they wish that to take. The digital capabilities framework was kind of being developed alongside at the same time in learning and teaching. Duncan McGyver, I think, is actually also listening in at the moment, is the chief architect of that. We also made sure that our framework was aligned to our IT strategy and also to the university's Duncan's just put up a chat in the chat, throw me off, and that we also aligned that to our graduate attributes, of which one of our attributes was and has been for the past 5 years, I think, that students would leave us being digitally literate. So the Future 360 is the basis upon which we are going out and embedding employability within the curriculum, and it connects with all the other frameworks, and we also have extracurricular support as well. And if Louise could put on the next slide, I can tell you a bit more about that. Fantastic. I love that, it's like power. We obviously had a physical centre where we would run workshops around various aspects of careers and employability skill development, but obviously in the current climate we've relied more heavily on our already online hub. We run a online service through Ab Integro. And as you can see from the picture on the screen, we took our Future 360, the 9 categories within our Future 360, and made sure that everything that we put out aligned to those 9 subject areas, those 3 main themes of working on yourself, working on your potential, and working on your future. Students also are encouraged to complete self-assessment tools, and I know Louise is going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but generally for all students we ask them to complete something that we call the Career Pulse, which is a gauge of how students are feeling, their confidence in certain areas in terms of their employability. And one of the questions does actually refer to how do you feel in this digital world, how are you feeling going forward, that you have the necessary skills. But it's not just about skills, and we're very, very clear in all our messaging that it's much more about having that mindset and having that analytical approach to being able to look at an Excel spreadsheet and ask those critical questions about, and how does this work for me? How can I make this tool, this knowledge that I have around using this form of IT, this IT technology, this thing that's in front of me, how can I use it to maximize my effectiveness? How can I use it to solve problems? How can I use it to also forward my degree? But how can it be of service to my employer? How will it help me in my role if I want to become an entrepreneur? What can you use IT for so that people become particularly that to us is what being capable is. It's not about knowing how I know how an Excel sheet works in a pivot table. It's actually what does that mean, and what context is that helpful and useful, and how can I manipulate that to suit what I need to be doing. So very much everything that we do is based on that. Obviously we've now gone online with all of our activities, so we already had quite a good resource on there to begin with, but I'm going to pass on to Louise now because we also wanted to run a particular project for our final year students to make sure that they were fully equipped in going out into the workforce. Louise?
Okay, that's where I kick in now. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about GradForce and the background and what it aims to achieve really in terms of developing students. GradForce is a project that's funded by Office for Students, and this particular one, there's 13 universities funded, but our particular project is to set up a new recruitment model for graduates, and it's a model that we're developing that's not been done before as it's going along, and it's particularly targeted at those from low socioeconomic backgrounds and widened participation groups to get them upskilled, their emotional resilience, improve their self-confidence, and so on and so forth, to enable them to feel confident in applying for those crucial roles. And it's local jobs for local graduates. It's keeping Kent students in Kent as well. The main objectives, we looked at with the project really sort of kicked off November 2019, and there's 2 elements to it. There's employer engagement, asking employers actually what do you want from your employees, your new employees, our amazing talent pool, and asking students where they think the gaps are, and we have a self-assessment tool that we're using, as well as events that we hold, and we've got one coming up. We had an employer event in December, and part of that employer engagement event was asking employers about digital, you know, what are the key attributes that you're looking for in a graduate and a graduate employee. And one of the top 10 was digital literacy. So all of the top 10, if you like, we have used now to inform our boot camp that we have going on in June. And that's based on all those attributes that students feel that they're missing and doing their own personal SWOT analysis, if you like, and the ones that employers said they wanted. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in terms of, you know, the top sort of 10 digital capabilities that employers are telling us that they need, where the gaps are sort of in the student knowledge. And a lot of them, we had 79 employers turn up to our event in December, which was pretty good considering we'd only been a month into the project. And on here you can see the key areas and the different types of jobs varied from hospitality manager to pharmaceutical assistant to accounts assistant, and various different roles that our employers have available for our prior to COVID-19 available for our students. And these are sort of the top 10 collated really from them, and it's no surprise it's the Microsoft suites and the Adobes and the social media side. So part of that has helped us develop our boot camp. We have a 3-week boot camp starting on the 1st of June. Because of COVID, it's now online. We now have GradForce online, and the boot camp will be held there. And part of that we launched alongside that, we launched a YouTube channel. So we now have GradForce Online, which is on YouTube, and on there are also tips and webinars and resources for students to access. So we also will have a boot camp digital week. And in that digital week, the sessions are based on the sort of gaps that students are saying that they have and employers say they want. So in Microsoft Suite, they will be able to do Adobe Photoshop. We have cyber security and a variety of different types. Some will be delivered by our internal IT and some are by external. We have an Adobe specialist who will deliver that. So part of this is called Etiquette of Work. So our digital program is called Etiquette of Work in the digital world. We have different sort of titles for the different areas of development that we do with our student. Our brand is Get Hired, and our students recognise that brand as that's where you want to go if you want to access some of these digital courses that we've got available. GradForce is primarily really for the 3rd year students. People can sign up in any year, but our specific events like boot camp has to be 3rd year only, and that's purely because we want to give them that big toolkit they need and go out there and find a job. We're also using Placer, which is an online app. Once again, developing their social media savvy and their capabilities of being able to go online, look for a job. So we're working with Placer, with employers and students to use Placer. We call it the Tinder for jobs, and I think Jisc know David Barker anyway, but and that's a really simple way for students to search for jobs. Our employers that we're working with will put their jobs on there, and they talk about their 5 key attributes that they want in that employee. And we work with the students on their attributes. So when their CVs and when their stuff goes up, both employer and student can see, and there's a match. It's a job matching service, which is quite easy for students to use and so on. So rather than going on, our future planning is to use the discovery tool a lot more, and as part of our students setting up their personal development plan, personal and professional development plan for their future career pathway. Part of that is looking at their, actually self-assessing their digital capabilities, as well as their confidence building and their self-assessment of where they think they're at in terms of their employability. And then that gives us the tools as we have for our boot camp. I've put the link on you can go onto our YouTube, the boot camp information is all on there, and it's on LinkedIn as well, because we work with employers and students. And we posted our boot camp nearly 2.5 weeks ago, and we have 238 students, third year students, signed up for it already. So there's clearly a lot of third years out there that need our support right now because of COVID as well. And we do luckily have some jobs for them when they graduate as well, not all 230 though. So really it's continuing to establish a self-assessment toolkit for students as part of their portfolio when they graduate, to give to employers to say, look, you know, this is what I've achieved, and I'm a certificated Microsoft Suite and Adobe trained, and the other part of it, in the next 6 months, we will also be hosting a digital ambassador scheme. So we're recruiting for digital ambassadors. So we will have, they will be trained to then deliver that mentoring and support to students throughout the university, and as specific digital ambassadors to give that peer mentoring in the Careers Hub and outreach around the university in lectures and seminars, in terms of continuing that development to students and enabling them to, you know, utilise the Jisc tools and discovery tools, etc. as well. And we will have a whole programme of sessions. And I'll just briefly hand over to Susan, who's going to talk to you about the extension of boot camp that's coming. And this is a joint project from GradForce and Careers and Enterprise. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Louise. Yes, just to round up, obviously we're very aware that the GradForce project is targeted at our final year students, and that was always the intention and always the plan, but an awareness that not all students would have signed up or will be signing up to GradForce because they don't fit the remit that GradForce particularly had. And also there's the wider student population who under COVID perhaps maybe feel a bit shortchanged, but also that we need to be looking at ways to engage with them over the summer, to keep them active, to keep them happy whilst they're still on lockdown, to keep developing their skills and keep their employability on the agenda. So what we're in the throes of doing at the moment is putting together a digital summer school. As with GradForce, some of that will be provided by our own internal IT staff, but also most of it will actually be provided by external practitioners. And that's the real key on the digital school. That's the angle that we're going for, is that we don't just want people, that's their job, is to train on Adobe. We want to bring in people who actively use Adobe in their work practices, so that as well as training students on how to use those different pieces of software, they're actually being able as well to give them that actual real life experience of, this is how you will be using it, this is how I use it, because we think that's actually quite an important element, is the application. As I was saying earlier, it's about bringing it alive and making students realize the power of IT and what they can do with these various different softwares, and getting them to think about their digital learning and what their needs and requirements are for the industries that they might be thinking of moving into. So thank you.
And that's it, that's us. Thank you very much for listening to us.
That's great. Thank you so much, Louise and Susan. I hope you might get a chance now to quickly look through the chat, because we've had, that's really stimulated a lot of conversation and sharing links. Martin from Alt has been able to share some links in there, as well as Sarah. So some really good connections and complementarity with other work that's going on with other universities and colleges that are on the call today. So thank you all for your great presentations. I'd like to take just a few minutes now to go through questions we've had in the chat and in the question and answer session, and then hand over to Sarah, who will run the panel. So first up is Ruth. We have a question about what does your department look like? Now, obviously it has a very nice blue background, but what sort of numbers of staff do you have in there in terms of content developers and learning technologists?
The project team itself is myself and my supervisor, but our implementation group has 28 members. We have 2 staff from Pathways and Academic Learning Support. We have 1 representative from Learning Design and Teaching Innovation. And he can bring in as many people as he wants as needed. We're actually looking to divide our implementation group up into small little subgroups to work on each of those aspects of the wish list that I talked about.
Great, thank you very much, Ruth. That's really interesting to hear how you're structured and supported. Because I know that's often a challenge in some institutions, especially if they're a little bit smaller. But I wonder, just before I move on to other questions, have you got any sort of observations or thoughts about any of the presentations you've heard today and in how they relate to your context?
I'm just so inspired by the fact that there are student partnerships out there, and there are contextualised things like GradForce and the digital summer schools, where you're bringing people from industry into the university to teach students. That's exactly the kind of thing that we want to do. So it's really great to know that it's out there and that we can learn from that.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's really great to see collaboration between the Australia, New Zealand universities and colleges with the UK ones, because I know we have quite a lot of staff moving between the different countries, and they obviously share and take their ideas with them. But it's really good to have that connection in terms of solutions as well.
That's right.
Moving on to questions to Joel and his team. So Joel, how do your student champions operate to support students and staff? And that's from Sonia at Glasgow Caledonian University. So Joel, do you want to take your mic?
Yeah, I believe, is that a question for Ruth? Is that a question for you? I think that might be, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, or Ruth, do you want to answer it? And then Joel, maybe you can give a slant as well.
So at the moment, our student reps are only part of our implementation group, and we haven't, I mean, they've brought fantastic perspectives to the work that we've done so far, but student champions are actually on my wish list. So Joel and the rest of your team, I'm going to have to pick your brains at some stage because your program sounds fantastic. But yes, it would be along the lines of communities of practice, and we could set them up because we have different campuses. They could move between campuses or set up at particular campuses and maybe hold coffee mornings or bite breakfasts or something like that, and just something fairly informal to help staff and students to kind of ease into this digital capability world and make it a lot more approachable for them.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Great,
I mean,
thanks, Ruth. So, sorry, Joel?
No, I mean, we don't have student champions as such implemented it. Sorry, I guess myself and the other interns, we are effectively acting as student champions, I guess. But yeah, it's a great opportunity to really be involved in also the designing aspects, not just the implementation, but being there in the background, really working out what is the best way to get these digital capabilities to be shared with the rest of the students on the university. So yeah, that's something definitely we're exploring, and we'll see how it goes in the future.
Amazing, thanks. And Ruth, if you want to get in touch with us at any time or anyone to talk about this, I'm sure we can exchange emails afterwards, and we'll be more than happy to talk.
Fantastic, Irina, thank you.
And maybe a site visit as well, you never know, maybe.
Hold
So we've
tight,
got
lots.
another question for you. Got another question for you, Ruth. How do you provide equipment and Wi-Fi access to disadvantaged students?
So we provide laptops, university laptops, to all of our postgrad and higher degree research students. We also have grants, laptop grants for undergraduates who are in difficult circumstances, and we actually had to set up, our Vice-Chancellor set up a special fund for, it was a hardship fund for students as soon as the COVID-19 lockdown was announced, because with all of our hospitality industries closing down, suddenly a lot of students were out of a job. So we do try to make sure that they have the equipment that they need, and the student services staff run a survey every year, just making sure what the pinch points are for students in terms of equipment and devices and access. The library stayed open right through the lockdown. Our 24/7 spaces were open. That's to guarantee students reliable Wi-Fi. We do have a lot of students who live on campus, and even though the NBN broadband is rolling out across Australia, there are still some places where Wi-Fi is less reliable than others. So the library was one place that the students could come where they would know that their connection was always guaranteed. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that we're doing, and the library is definitely part of the equity package, and we're trying to make sure that we keep that going.
Okay, and last question for you, Ruth, from Lena at Glasgow Caledonian. She's asked, how do you balance the need to state a prerequisite digital skill with the need to provide inclusive education to the wider population?
That is an excellent question, Lena. Thank you. That is all part of the implementation work. So it's a huge question. Accessibility is important in everything that we do. We also have robust discussions around this whole idea of inclusivity and inclusion. So it is a balancing act, as you say. And I think we're just going to have to keep trying approaches, embrace failure, and not be afraid to try things. And if they don't work, move on to something else.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. And now we've got a question from Heidi from South Africa to Joel and his team, I believe. And I'll just read out her question so you can think about who would like to answer it. So Heidi says, I really like the concept of equity. In South Africa, this concept is the utmost importance. Please, can you provide practical example of how to ensure equity? I worked at a previously disadvantaged university. The university's student population largely comes from rural areas. Not only is the network accessibility and bandwidth an issue, but also data is very expensive in South Africa. In addition, basic services, electricity, running water, etc., is either sparse in some rural areas or non-existent. So what a challenge.
Definitely. Yeah. Would anyone like to answer that one?
So, Ruth, have you got a question, a solution or possible solution of how you manage equity of provision for some of your students in different environments, living environments?
What I can do is actually read you out parts of our equity statement that we put into our policy document. Would that be helpful?
Or perhaps put a link in the chat, because I'm mindful of time, that we're biting into the panel's time. But
yes.
We're really keen to engage with all of you, and especially Ruth from Australia, to hear about your experiences, and Heidi in South Africa as well, because you do
Absolutely.
have different challenges in some ways, but maybe solutions can be similar.
What I might do, Ruth, is I'll have to email the document to you because it's part of our SharePoint site. So I will send an email through, and we can share it that way.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ruth. So a question from Jean to Sam at Surrey. Are you planning to do the same thing with the next year's foundation students? Is there anything you would do differently?
I certainly am, but there will have to be something done slightly differently because sadly the Edu interns will not be about to help me out with this one anymore. So what's fabulous about this is they've been on board all the way through designing this workshop, I guess you'd call it, with all the bits that go around it. So I'll be able to take that, and it's really been designed with, they took it and they just ran with it. So it's really been designed from a student perspective, which is great. The only thing I do differently is this coming year, we'll probably do it a little bit earlier. It would be nice for the students to have a go earlier on, have some reflection time about it, and then maybe think about it towards the end of their foundation year again. So a little bit more and a little bit earlier, I think.
Great, thank you, Sam. Right, we've got another question from Lena. And I think this is still to you and your team, Joel. So do you embed digital skills teaching as well as top-ups like a digital summer school?
I believe that might be for the team at Canterbury, I believe, as they were discussing.
Oh, Joel.
I believe that's probably us.
Okay, we've moved on.
Susan here, I can field that. Yes, we do, is the short answer. We embed digital learning across all of our subjects, all the programs, just as we embed employability within, we like, actually employability, we prefer to refer to it as extracting the employability rather than embedding it, because the students are developing, learning the skills, they just need that to be pointed out to them. And certainly the summer schools and the other workshops that we run throughout the year are additional, they're advanced, they're add-ons, they're certificated, they are extra to the stuff that's going on in the curriculum.
Great, thank you, Susan and Louisa. Right, Nick Jeans has asked the last question, and then we'll hand over to Sarah for the panel. So I don't know if anybody would like to answer this one, but Nick asks, are there any cheaper alternatives for institutions to providing equipment and internet access to disadvantaged students? So has any
state subsidised education? I mean, just putting it out there.
Yeah. Just to pick up on that one, Ruth, Jisc has been doing a lot of work in collaboration with the Association of Colleges, particularly on the FE and skills sector. So there is some work underway, Nick, that is looking at that angle, particularly in the current situation.
Brilliant, thank you, Sarah.
Well, I have got.
So I'd like to.
Sorry, there was just one final question for the Canterbury team. If I can just read that out, because that was coming through from the chat, and that was a question to Louise, just to say, can I clarify, is the Digital Skills Training Summer School open to all students, not only third years?
Yes,
and
it is.
And what kind of numbers can you accommodate? And that was
okay, so we have the Grad Force Bootcamp, which is Digital Week, but that's for third years only. But the Digital Summer School is for all students, and it's going to be delivered on Collaborate, so we can hold up to 250 students in those sessions, although it's not advised because some of them will be leading towards certificates. So it may be that we'll have several sessions throughout one day with different students, because if you're doing Adobe, it's quite intense. So it's usually 10 maximum, but we might have 3 sessions every day throughout that week on Adobe, so then we can accommodate more students. But yes, we can accommodate quite a lot of students on the Collaborate virtual classroom, which is what we're using to deliver our boot camp and our digital summer school, as obviously we're not going to be there. So yes, is the answer.
Thank you.
Sarah, have you got time for one more question for Canterbury that came through on chat?
Yes, of course, Jeanette.
Yes, it says, I'd be interested to know why you're using Placer and not your own Canterbury Jobs portal.
I saw that. We do, yeah. We do use a Canterbury Jobs portal, but for GradForce, it's a bespoke project, and we work with employers to find jobs for students, and that is the portal that we use for our job matching service. It does link into Canterbury's job portal. However, because GradForce is a bespoke project, we use Placer because students who are signed up to GradForce have access to the app, and the employers that sign up to GradForce to give us jobs for our students, that's where they post their jobs essentially, because it's a bespoke service. So the employers that we work with are local SMEs in Kent, and we're sourcing students for them and vice versa. So we use Placer because it fits the profile of the project that we're doing. However, students can search for other jobs on Placer as well, but it does link in with Canterbury's overall job match. But generally, because GradForce is a specific bespoke project, it is an easier way to manage that, because we work with the employers and the students to match them up together. So it gives us a better sort of avenue to be able to do that, rather than a general, university portal which is for all students. We use Placer for third years only, because that's what we do, because we're getting them jobs basically. So yeah, is that okay?
You. That's perfect. And I'm just sort of taking over now from Ruth, but really just to say a huge thank you to those 3 fabulous sessions. There have been so many positive comments in the chat window, hearing about the exchange of practice and the work that others are doing. Lots of ideas for us to take away. So this is sort of the final plenary, and I'm going to do this as a double act with Rob. We're going to share a little bit about our reflections on what we've been hearing from today's sessions, and to try and do some of that justice, although there is probably too much for us to mention in the short time we've got left. And then just to ask a few questions from yourselves in terms of how you felt the event has gone today and what we can do to support you through the current and the new normal. So I'm going to hand over to Rob initially, just to share some thoughts from his side, and then I'll pick up after that.
Hi Sarah, thank you for that. Thank you to all the amazing presentations over the day. When Ali and I were putting the keynote together, obviously we didn't have a clue what everyone else was going to be talking about, but I've really enjoyed the conversations, and I think it really reinforces the main topic for the day. I think that was in the community of practice event. Some of my very sort of brief sort of reflections trying to bring things together. I mean, it was interesting. I think first of all, obviously we had the block of staff sessions, and we went right the way through really from recruitment to engagement of staff and how you actually get their digital skills aligned with that. Picking up a comment I think from Sonia about how do you get digital capability under the noses of senior staff, and particularly how do you get that profiling in there. And some of this is due to general change processes. You need to feed some of the data in, go prepared with the information. Obviously having data from the Insight survey really helped us, because we were able to say where we were as an institution, and we could benchmark ourselves against those other people in the sector who'd also done the survey. And when you start doing benchmarking in front of senior people, that's when they sort of start to take notice. So that's really helpful, I think, from that side. Then obviously we moved, this afternoon into the student sessions, and we had the full range from induction right the way up to employer engagement. And I think the interesting thing that I picked out from that is about bringing all of the technology together, and I know that was also mentioned this morning as well, and developing an integrated process really for students that enables them to flow from one stage to the next, ultimately moving to employability at the end, and how we can actually work towards that. I was conscious, and I sort of made a little tally of how many times the Jisc framework was actually mentioned, and it's pretty, I think it's fairly clear that people are using that now as a foundation, I think, for their own particular work. And obviously we saw there about the definitions of what is digital literacy, and we've been discussing that at Northampton as well. And I think the framework does help us, and it gives us a way to actually measure that. Some of you have got your own particular ways of doing that internally, and I think, you know, everyone is finding a way that is working for them, and I think that's the important thing. And I think for myself, I was sort of very much sort of, I think, buoyed up by all the different things, all the different approaches that I've heard today, some brilliant ideas that, you know, for myself, I'm going to take away, and hopefully I think everyone's probably found at least one thing, if not many things, that they're going to be doing a little bit differently as a result of attending today's session. So thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you, Rob. And I'll probably just sort of pick up on some of those themes, just from what I was picking up on my side. And I think absolutely, I think that point around how do we engage senior leaders in this is no longer optional for them. I think the current situation that we are in has focused their attention on this, because it is the only way that we're possibly going to be able to deliver our learning for some time to come. And when that is linked to student fees, when there is linked to that equity of access, equity of provision, equity of experience, that I think, the argument's there that this is no longer optional. I know certainly within Jisc there is work going on, which I think will be announced very shortly with other key sort of strategic partners, to see how we can work more closely with the sector and with senior leaders around this. So I think that's something that we'll be seeing a lot more action on. Likewise, we've already seen on the FE side the work that AOC has been leading on with the FE leaders survey that they did around COVID. So already a lot of very strong evidence there that this has to be considered. Things that I was picking up, I think, from this morning's session, and I think, I go back to your session, Rob, with Ali, back to those sound pedagogic principles. What is good practice? How do we support staff with thinking and redesigning, their course, their assessment, their delivery, and lots of sort of retweets, I think, of the principles you were saying and sharing around the session planning work. So that was something that came through. I think the other thing that I picked up on the staff side from our member stories presentations was the importance, again, that this is no longer optional for staff. This is something that is part of the way they are delivering their learning, and should be then built into continuing professional development, if not into setting goals in terms of sort of staff appraisal. It's as much about their professional knowledge, their experience, their skills, as their discipline, as their sort of subject area. So really, I think we're seeing a lot more emphasis on that coming through, both from FE and HE in terms of the conversations and discussions. The other thing I want to say about the afternoon session, I think there were two really strong themes to me, and one I'm absolutely, well, both I think I'm absolutely delighted about. One, the recognition that working with students, again, is something that is so powerful. We're in our 8th year of our student staff partnership network called the CAN network. I know Luke was in the participants today from Birmingham City University, where we were going to hold our 8th annual CAN conference, but unfortunately it had to be postponed due to COVID. There is a wealth of knowledge around student staff partnerships in the sector. Going back to some of the early work Rob and I were involved with, Gemma was on earlier, around our student experience work and the power of student partnerships. There's a new 6th edition of the CAN Journal, which was launched last week. Simon Walker and Liz Ellis launched that. So please do get in touch if you are interested in student staff partnerships. The other area is employability. And I think that's coming through so strongly. And of course, all our evidence from our digital experience insight surveys from students and staff is very much pointing to the fact that if we are to truly prepare our students moving into the digital workplace, We have to ensure that our students are digitally capable. That last session from Canterbury Christ and the work that Louise is doing and her team there really, I think, puts the spotlight on that. We have to be preparing our students, and we can only do that if our staff feel that they are digitally confident and capable. So those are my sort of key takeaways from today. And I just want to share my screen for a moment, but while I do that, I don't know, Rob, if Ali wanted to share any of his reflections. I know he's still with us, so just double checking that while I share my screen.
I'm actually okay, so no further additions from me, but happy to address any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Well, I think from all the chat and the tweets, I think everyone wants to come and visit you. So if your campus is eventually open and it's safe to, I think we'll all be queuing up to come and see you on your campus. So again, thank you very much to all our presenters for their participation today. Now, I know there have been some comments in the chat around participating in this type of forum with an online experience rather than our usual face-to-face. And I know we've already spoken about the disadvantages of that, not being on that beautiful campus. But I wonder, Lisa, if we could perhaps just bring up the poll. We have got some questions that we would like your input into. Firstly, in relation to bringing our two communities together, we have merged our digital capability and our digital experience insights communities together. We'd very much like to hear people's views on that, so please do get voting. And we're seeing some interesting figures coming in there. Okay. Do we want to close that one, Lisa, and see if we can? We've still got numbers increasing. Okay, thank you. So probably just edging out, I think, by 61% to have the meetings joined. And I think partly of what we've seen today, there is so much overlap that it's very difficult to actually separate out these issues now. Because if we are talking about an effective student digital experience, we have to ensure that we have got staff and students that are digitally capable and that we have got that digital strategy, that vision underpinning this. Thank you, Lisa. Shall we move on to the second question? And please do share any further comments in the chat if you have got comments around that. So the second question should be around whether we are talking about face-to-face or online. So I'm not quite sure. We should have a second question coming up. There we go. Right, so hopefully you'll be able to see that shortly. So today, obviously, we were online. I know there have been comments there to say we've missed out on visiting Northampton, but for many, it enabled them to attend where they wouldn't have been able to attend if it was face-to-face. This all relates to, obviously, the situation that we are in and how long that may continue. So interesting just to see people's responses there as well. Okay, so alternating between face-to-face and online. I think that's because of your beautiful campus that we're missing out on today. Probably not if we'd said it'll be in our usual venues in some of our usual cities. So great to see that. Okay, thank you, Lisa. I think that stops our polling. And just a last question. We've got a QR code on there which you can use, or the Menti link down the bottom. But I think what is really important for us, and one of the reasons behind running these events is not only to hear about your great practice to enable that sharing of ideas, but also to inform Jisc work. And what's really important for us is we have a chance to find out, what are the areas that you would like Jisc to support you on. We have always used our co-design principles of working with the community to inform what we do, what we offer, and what support is in place. So please do share those thoughts. If it's in the chat window, please do. or otherwise use the Menti, and we'll be able to collate those post-event as well. So I'm going to pause there. I'm just going to check if there were any further comments in the chat, and also just to see if, okay, right. If the Menti isn't open for some reason, that's probably down to my digital capability. It was working when I checked it, but I will double check that once I have got out of leading the session. I will double check that. But please do add some thoughts into the chat window, and I'll double check the Menti. But I will just hand over to Nisa, to Ruth, Jeanette and Claire, just to see if there's anything that I need to be picking up on for a moment.
I think maybe one of the most important things might be if anybody would like to co-host the next event or the next two events.
Thank you, Ruth. Whether that's virtually, as we have been doing with our partnership with the University of Northampton, or whether we are in the position to host that in a non-virtual sense. So please do get in touch with us if there are any ideas on that. Any other?
Somebody behind you.
I know. Where's that slide that Rob had around? We've managed to get to 2:15, which I think we've probably done quite well. Apologies for that. Any other?
Yeah, at least it wasn't a basketball.
We had a question about sharing the chat after the session. I think everybody can do it by clicking on the 3 dots at the bottom, but I think we also share that too, don't we, Lisa?
Sorry, Claire. Yes, no, I'm not sure. We might need to just explore how we do that.
But if in the chat box where you've got the 3 dots, you can save the chat. If you would like to do that now, everybody can do that, I think. I've just taken a copy just in case.
Thank you, Claire, for that. Right, well, I think that probably we will draw it to an end. Just to say our thanks certainly to Rob and to Ali for co-hosting this event with us and for their excellent presentation. To all our presenters today, it's been a real privilege and wonderful actually just to be able to get out and hear all this wonderful practice that you're all doing. It's great to have all the participation that we've had. I mean, we were up to 190 delegates during the course of today, which has been fantastic, while everyone is also, busy doing their day jobs. As we said earlier, the recordings will be shared via email with you all. The presentations will be available next week on our Jisc website. And a huge, huge thank you to your participation. We look forward to continuing the discussions, and again, do also sharing your reflections with us post-event in the evaluation form as well. So very big thank you to you all, and stay well and keep safe. Thank you.